We're live, bitch.
No, we're not.
Home audio entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down, relax, enjoy the music.
Oh, okay, oh, now it's your turn.
How you doing? We're starting up, are we?
Yes. Hello, Liam. Welcome back.
Who is this? Where am I?
Fresh out of the Windy City. How was it?
Awful. Should be struck from the earth, the whole place.
Jesus.
No, it was good. It's a good time. Very cultural.
What was the main objective? You just want to get out of the city.
No, well, I just wanted to go up to Wellington. Just hadn't been there in a while. Get a bit of arts and culture up in me gullet. As
Well
they say.
needed.
Yep, it was. It was a good break. Catch up with some friends.
Yep.
See some sights. Do some things.
Was it truly
Go to some
windy?
parties. Literally didn't stop being windy the whole time.
Yeah.
I was there for 7 days. Didn't stop
Yeah.
once.
No, that would bother me to know.
It haunted my dream. Even in my dreams, I could hear the wind. Yeah, no, it
Couldn't
was.
sleep at night.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was really difficult.
What gigs did you go to while you were there?
Well,
What parties?
I don't want to incriminate myself here. I didn't actually. I was supposed to go to 2 gigs up there. I was supposed to go to the Juno is Sophia McRae gig on the Thursday night, which obviously didn't happen because of the level 2. And I was also supposed to go to another one that the name is slipping me right now, but I was supposed to go to it.
Sorry,
But
won't hold you to it.
instead I went to an illegal gathering at the Miramar bunkers.
Oh, a maximum 100 people.
Yes,
Gathering.
yes,
I
yes.
see.
I won't. There wasn't more than. Well, I mean, there probably was more than 100 people there, but it was outside, and it wasn't about COVID. I think it was more about the fact that we weren't supposed to be having a rave at an old fort,
Oh, I see.
and the police came and
Oh, joy.
made everyone leave. But I had already left by that point because a lot of the people that I was with were from Chile and Argentina, and they were afraid of the police and potentially overstaying.
Did you talk to any of them? Have they tourists that have been here for
They
a
lived
while?
with
or like
they lived
something?
with our friend Jake
Oh, right.
in his flat. He had a big 10, 12, 15
Right,
person
so
flat.
they were living here.
They were living there and working and everything, but I think they just didn't want to be caught up with the cops in case
Yeah, sure.
they get detained for whatever reason and they're not allowed to be in New Zealand anymore, or
Jesus.
they get sent back to Chile or
Yeah,
Peru.
right. Can that even really happen at the moment? You can kick people out of.
I mean, if you're
country?
overstaying, if they, I don't know their personal, I'm not going to go out and.
I was
name
thinking
them or anything.
generally, yeah, not just these 2 individuals.
Well, you wouldn't just get. I can't imagine you'd just get arrested and deported. It
Right.
wouldn't work that way. You wouldn't just like, hey, you spent too much time at that illegal rave in Miramar,
Sorry about
mate. Sorry,
Back home for you.
back off to Guantanamo. No, but they would, like, if you were overstaying or whatever, they'd probably pursue that in the courts and then
Yeah.
they'd make you leave because of
Yeah,
that.
interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, funny how we are having to adapt to these rules that aren't really making much sense at the moment. Due to at least in the South Island, having to follow stuff that's not super. It seems as though we're following rules that not a lot of people are following.
Yeah.
and no one's really actually practicing any other distancing or anything
Welling-
aside from signing into stores. It seems like once
Wellington
you've done
was a lot more conscious of that than down here, I found.
that, yeah,
A lot more. There's a lot less people on the streets if they don't have to be. Obviously, because the government is centred there, so people are going to be following it quite stringently. / working for the government / just more publicly socially conscious because it's just sort of the hub of that feeling for the country.
yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting. There's nothing on. There's no clubs open on Saturday night.
Right.
I went to.
That's the same
no-
here though, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but there wasn't any bars. There were bars, but there wasn't. It wasn't like any other time you go to Wellington. People would say, "Oh, we go to this club and we go to this bar, we go to this gig, whatever." That had been completely cut out of it. It was kind of like, "Oh, we've been kicked out of Miramar, so you have to leave Miramar at 1:45. Now let's go to some flat party on Abel Tasman Street, Abel Smith Street, actually." This party we went to afterwards, I left at about, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. It was getting quite late. Was pretty tired. The next day, went to, just went about my business, just did some general things around the area. Came back to the flat at 5 o'clock that night, and somebody who had been at the bunkers with me just got back from that house party at 5 o'clock the next night.
Jesus.
So I'd literally gone 24 hours plus.
I've never been able to comprehend that. People that just stay on for
It's
that.
called
long.
drugs.
I was just,
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly
makes sense.
would be my guess.
That's
I mean, a lot of it is stamina and will and endurance. Like,
Yeah.
drugs just aren't going to take you there on their own.
Right.
But I think that was probably
Yeah.
what had happened. Yeah.
I was talking to flatmates before about microdosing
Mm-hmm.
and sort of learning about what that is and why people do it. Is it something you've heard people
Mm-hmm.
do? Any outlook on it?
I don't know. I think if you have the right personality and are microdosing appropriately, then I think it's very doable, very helpful for people with depression or PTSD. Have you ever heard of a musician called Father John Misty before?
That rings a bell.
Yeah. He microdoses. He's been microdosing every day since 2016, apparently.
Like psychedelics?
LSD. I
Right.
think. Yeah.
So what is that doing for him?
Well, it's just you're taking minute amounts, obviously microdosing, hence the name. But I guess it would just provide the anxiety alleviation / give everything an oral tinge, psychedelic tinge to your everyday going about, I would imagine.
Right.
But, I mean, I'm sure there's some clinicians, physicians, etc., that in certain parts of the world, perhaps more open-minded parts of the world, that would recommend microdosing. I have met people that microdose before, and I've never considered it because, one, I don't have access to that kind of resource. Two, I've never really felt that I was in a position to acquire it. And three, for me, if you're doing a psychedelic, you're doing a psychedelic.
Yeah, well, that was my thought around it. It's like, why? I feel like I wouldn't be wanting to take a psychedelic every day. Granted, it's a microdose, a very, very small amount, but depends on, I guess, how much you're getting from that microdose, you know, whether you're actually starting to have a psychedelic experience or whether you're just sort of gently easing it into...
I don't think you'd be you wouldn't be if you're having a full blown psychedelic experience, then you're not microdosing correctly. I think.
Right.
I think you could probably still experience aspects of a psychedelic experience. You know, like I said,
with
anxiety
that,
alleviation, or maybe color change, or just general approach to dialogue and action, etc.
With the psychedelics, if you are microdosing, what is it that you are really getting from it? What is it about LSD in such a small form factor?
It'd be anxiety alleviation, I'd say. It's just think about it this way. Think about like
So is it playing on the side of what this drug is doing to you before it really sort of kicks into the psychedelic side of things?
Basically.
Like, where does the anxiety relief come in such a small amount?
probably, well, I can't speak to it from experience. So I've had discussions with people about it, but I guess if you're having it at a micro level over a period of time, it becomes the normal, right? It becomes the norm, like say 4 or 5 weeks, and then you just start doing it every time from then. So I guess it would adjust as you started experiencing whatever. But I would imagine that the anxiety relief would be the majority of why people would take it, because I don't know. Say the general thought process of a psychedelic trip when you're about to experience or you're on the come up, whatever, is that you're going to be quite focused on that because it's an intense experience, and so I guess elements of that would come into play where it's not as intense and you're not like being thrust through this kind of experience, but you're also still getting those little nodules, pings from a very microdosed form of that experience. So I don't know, it might just be that you're walking around the streets and sometimes the work you're doing might be heavily academic or whatever, or I don't know. I'd have to think of a specific example, but somebody might feel that their work life is overbearing or social interactions overbearing or whatever, and they might just microdose and find that those situations become easier, or they think less about them, or they become more broader scaled in their thoughts of interactions rather than just, man, I just had a really weird chat with Lucy. I'm attracted to her. That felt like shit. Now I have to go back to my cubicle and think about it for 2 hours, you know? Whereas this might just be, you have it and you're like, oh, that was a bit weird, but whatever, just roll with the flow.
Right, that's interesting. I've never really had a full-blown experience with psychedelics, or at least had enough experience with it to really know what it is that it's doing, but I just find it interesting how, you know, you're obviously figuring out what dosage in your capacity is. I presume it's different for every person. You're sort of finding what a microdose is to you and what that microdose is doing for you on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think there would be a variant of microdosing from person to person, but you also wouldn't want to, there'd be a rule of thumb, a sort of referential. You'd want to be checking forums or asking people and find a baseline comparable to, say, your body weight or your age or something like that. Right. You wouldn't just want to be like, oh, well, all the other experiences I've had have been on a tab of acid. Maybe I should have a tenth of a tab every day until that runs out. Like, it wouldn't quite work like that.
Right, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just haven't formed an opinion.
Psilocybin mushrooms would probably be the more commonly used microdosing instrument, right, due to the ability to get it yourself and not cost you any money, and also just more. I guess some people might feel it's more natural because it's not synthesized. It's not a chemical.
Do you think that humanity has come from psychedelics? Do you think that language
we're
is
talking
built
stone ape theory? Is that what we're talking about? I don't think it's come from that. I think it's played a hand the same way as arts have played the hand, or education or technology or warfare or any of those things.
You don't think that a conscious being like humans have developed a conscious being through a psychedelic?
Oh, I don't think that there's any. I don't think that there's a whole lot to discredit about, say, like a stoned ape theory. Do you know what stoned ape theory is?
I presume it's what I'm asking you about, but I don't actually know.
Well, yeah, it's basically what we're kind of hovering around a bit. It's just the idea that humans developed or coincided their development with the use of psilocybin or, just certain variants of plants, whatever that entered the diet, and then that propelled more abstract thought patterns or a grander scheme of intellectualness, whatever. Yeah. And the theory that the acacia tree, which is common, it's quite a common, you can find it in a lot of places, but particularly supposedly common in the Middle East and in Africa, and that is potentially what the burning bush from...
What did you call it?
It's called the acacia. It's quite I don't know, it's maybe like...
That's definitely not how you spell it.
Nah, just look up acacia bush. It'll just lead you into... But yeah, I guess the idea is that... Yeah, there you go, acacia, that Wikipedia one even...
What acacia trees used for? The most common use is growing acacia for wood in the manufacturing of furniture. That doesn't sound at all like...
No, what if you go into the Wikipedia...
and psychedelic toxicity.
If you look up toxicity, it's a certain type of... See, like here, if you go up a little bit, just a tiny bit, so it says here, the southernmost species in the genus Acacia delbata, silver wattle Acacia longifolia, which is known as the Sydney golden wattle. So in Australia, their national plant is called the golden wattle, so it's a variant of this acacia. And a commonly created drug is derived from that. It's called Aussie. They call it Aussie-waska, which is... Have you ever heard of ayahuasca before? It's like So the variant called Aussie-waska is from this golden wattle, which is a plant that... It's literally the national plant of Australia. You can find it anywhere. Well, not anywhere, but you can find it in a lot of places in Australia, publicly, in the wild, whatever. And if you take I'm not sure if it's the root or the flower, but you grind that into a kind of a paste, dust, smokable material. It produces a similar to DMT kind of experience, but not quite. I don't think it's quite as long.
Right. Is this something that we find here in New Zealand?
Well, if you go into where it says Acacia longifolia, that one there, yep. I don't think it's in New Zealand. So it's considered invasive in Portugal Victoria, and South Africa.
South Australia. Interesting. It looks familiar though.
If you go to like phytochemistry, maybe up a little bit, sorry. Cultivation uses. Okay, maybe it won't come. Maybe it won't tell us because we're on a bit of a PG thing. But if you literally look up a thing called Aussie, like if you look up AUSSIE, WASKA or ZKA, it wouldn't matter too much. It's one word. It's called. Here's one from the academia.edu. So it's sometimes called Changa. Some people call it Aussie-waska. That's a PDF you got download. That's an academic study. No, you won't be able to get it.
Admin.
Yeah. Okay, if you look up Changa.
Changa.
Yeah, CHANGA. drug, I guess, in the Wikipedia. Yep. Yeah. So like it was created in 2003 when he was asked for a moniker for the drug during an ayahuasca session.
Jeez.
Yeah, so in festivals in Australia you could find it, and
Yeah, right.
yeah, it's basically, I don't know if Chango is the same as Aussie They might be very I
So
don't know.
where does DMT come from?
Where does it come from?
Or is it its own entity?
It's
and where is
a
it found?
it's a molecule. It's called the spirit molecule, if you want to call it that. So it's present in a lot of things.
Right.
We could go on a very long tangent about this. Certain things are DMT, MAOI infused kind of thing, which means that if they're smoked or refined into a consumable product, it would create a DMT trip style experience.
Right.
But there's all kinds of, I've heard, I don't know what the truth to it is, but I've heard that even like common lettuce has traces of DMT in it. I think lots of
That's why
anything
it tastes
can.
so good.
Just it just has real small amounts.
Right.
And the DMT infused things that work with your receptors just happen to be select
Interesting.
substances.
How do you typically take a dose of DMT?
Smoke it.
Right.
Mm.
But how do you even access it?
It comes from like a bark, so it can come
Yeah,
from
or
like an
what
ayahuasca
form do you
vine,
get it?
or
Right.
so. Not that I'm advising people out there to do this, of
No,
course.
definitely not.
But if you were to be curious about it, the average person that would do this, I'm not saying that I've done this, by the way, not speaking as an expert on the matter, just from what I know about it, is that you might use the dark web, or like the Silk Highway, one of those kind of tour, whatever, sites, and just order the bark. And you can basically, once you have the vine or the bark itself, you can begin the process yourself. It's quite obviously risky to do that. It's not legal to possess it. It's not legal to create it, etc. But it's doable. Yeah, basically you just refine the bark or you can brew it. I think a lot of the common ways to brew it, and then kind of freebase it style kind of scenario. I'm pretty half-assing this because I've never actually seen it. I've seen it before, but I've never seen it produced.
Yeah.
Basically.
No. Oh well, I presume it's fairly uncommon. At least here, I don't know what the chains are like here, but just interesting. I just wanted to know how. A lot of drugs I don't really know.
You
where
could
they
find
come
it in
from, they're
Dunedin.
just sort of in their
Let's put
own.
it that way. You could find it here.
Yeah, right. You just have to know where to go.
You just have to be looking for the right things, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But yeah.
Have you seen Elon Musk's new presentation for his Neuralink?
I have not. For the Neuralink.
Yeah.
How new are we talking?
Hmm?
How new are we talking? A couple of weeks ago, or like?
Yeah, I think it was last week.
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, so I didn't end up watching the whole thing because it actually sort of felt like it was going to get a bit disturbing because he's put one into a pig. And so his demonstration was going to be him presumably, showing what
it
it
on
can
the pig.
do on the pig. And I sort of thought, well, I don't know if I want to watch this.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see when we are older how Elon Musk is perceived. Because he's done some things that are pretty fucked,
He's definitely an odd bod.
He is. I definitely, without any kind of psychology background, I'd probably say he's somewhere on the spectrum, somewhere.
For sure.
But like,
I mean, he's definitely he's got a brain, and he's definitely like the future to some degree. But it's just he sort of seems to float around ideas that perhaps are a bit too extreme. Like
He's a
the
bit of a
idea of a colony of people that have chips in their head that can do all these stuff that he's saying they can do. It just doesn't seem human anymore.
Yeah,
which
well,
is a
that's-
huge advancement in technology, but it's in terms of humanity, like it's not exactly. I don't think
well,
a
that's the thing.
foolproof method.
That's a whole issue with science, really, isn't it? Ethics. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. I'm about to sneeze. Warning, listeners, I'm about to sneeze anytime within the next 10 seconds. That's an ethics thing in science, I guess, because they've been in conditions where people have not been limited, is when there has been a lot of there's been a lot of messed up shit happen because of it, in terms of people being murdered essentially in labs, or like forced against their will to do things or vivisected or whatever, like some very grim stuff. But because that happened, there has actually been advancement from that, you know, like not justifying or saying it was right, but there was, for example, information that they got off of German scientists from the Nazi era that they had conducted, because there was no limit on scientific experiment in Nazi Germany. You know, if you said, I want to take these, if, you know, the doctor of death said, I want to take these nuns and perform live surgery, etc., on them, no one stopped him. So there was morbidly curious questions of science that were answered in that, you know.
Yeah,
e.g.
in the middle of a war, and if it's something related to what they were doing at the time.
It wasn't really related in terms of, like, you know, they weren't really conducting experiments to make things better for themselves. They were more conducting eugenics experiments to see how they could manipulate
Creating
race.
what, sorry?
Like eugenic experiments, like,
What is that?
well, sterilizing the disabled, or just eugenics to do with the formulation of creating a race or creating a master race kind of thing. Putting nuns in an oven and turning the oven up to as high as it could to witness, to see how far a human body could stand in the heat kind of thing, like that. Stuff that was just completely messed up and should never have happened. But to satisfy the morbid curiosities of those people, they got to witness it and see, and actually they did get an answer. Like, not saying it's right or scientifically correct or that I support it, because I absolutely don't, but that kind of shit did occur.
Yeah. It's interesting how far you could go with science without ethics involved, you know?
Well, that's the question about it as well. And that's why I think Elon Musk probably is a troublesome individual, is because I feel like he probably would go, if someone was to say that his wealth is already a shield in a lot of ways, because he's done things that the average person, if you did it, you'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Like, do you remember when that group of Thai boys got stuck in the cave, that soccer team a couple of years ago, and they had to get these couple of British divers to go really dangerously into these crevices, and, you know, with nothing to spare kind of thing. So these two, it was either one or two, it might have been two, British divers that lived in Thailand rescued this group of boys, all of them alive. Amazing feat of fucking heroics and just the balls on these guys to do it, right? And Elon Musk tweeted, he actually got in an argument on Twitter with one of the rescuers, because Elon Musk had come to Thailand, or had been in talks with the people in Thailand about potentially using a Tesla piece of equipment or vehicle to try to maneuver to get into these, an unmanned or manned piece of equipment to get into the cave to rescue these boys. And basically the scientists have said, well, those are good ideas, but we need to get these boys out now, and the things you're talking about aren't actually scientifically feasible. You know, they gave them valid reasoning, like, we can't because, you know, you're looking at this from a logical side of things, and once it's down there, it won't be able to go through these parts, and yada, yada, yada. They gave him rebuttals for what he said, right? And he got quite mad about it and basically vented on Twitter saying, you know, I'm trying to help. They're turning me down. Who are they to turn me down? I'm Elon Musk. And then he targeted one of the divers, and one of the divers had either responded to him or had mentioned in an interview, said, you know, Elon Musk did put his hand up to help, but he didn't understand the logistics of diving and the ability to actually go into these cave systems and help these children out. And he basically just responded on Twitter. He atted this guy who had just saved 15 plus kids and accused him of being a pedophile. And said, what would you know, like, you're living in Thailand, you're a 50-year-old British man, like, we all know what that means, you're after the little boys kind of thing like this. And everyone's like, bro, what the fuck? This guy just saved a whole bunch of kids, and you're just mad, and you're turning this into a feud, and you're calling this guy a pedophile. Like, if anybody else, well, maybe not anymore, because shit's pretty whack in terms of what people say on the internet and get away with, but in the terms of decorum, if any other kind of businessman or investor or, you know, person who had their finger on the social pulse did that, they'd be fucking lambasted.
Yeah.
He did it with no proof either. It's not like there's some sort of dicey information out about this dive or anything. He fully went in there. Like.
That's the problem with egotistical people like Elon, is that he thinks that his product is perfect, and he's obviously done very well in terms of his businesses and where he's at with technology and that sort of thing. And Tesla products are obviously very, doing very well. But yeah, there comes a point where so much of that and so much money from that gets in the way, and then you think because you are doing so well because of how you are in the business field or technology field that your answer is the right answer. No one's really ever told you no because you're at the top sort of thing. And because he is so social media present, you know, it's easy for him to make comments like that. But what was the Tesla product that he wanted to?
Oh, it wasn't an actual. I don't think it was a. It wasn't. It's not something that's available on the market or that has actually been created. It was just a blueprint style idea of a.
So he wanted to build something.
He wanted to build a machine that could go through the cave system, etc., etc. And
how quickly could he even come up with that?
Exactly,
that's ridiculous.
That was one of the first problems. But the other problem was that he was actually kind of rebutting some of these experts because he felt that they were being too restrictive. But they were like, well, we have to be restrictive because, you know, we can't make something that won't work, or we can't make something that will work and then kill the children, or we can't make something that'll go down there and not come back up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those kind of scenarios. Basically just logic. He was basically just faced with logic. And
it's not really the time to be thinking about making something.
No.
You've got to think about what you have. It's, you know, people's lives are at stake. You can't just...
you should have a look at what he said to the guy. Just so I'm not misquoting him. I'm pretty sure he accused the guy of being a pedophile. If you just look up...
I can't imagine the tweets are there anymore.
If you just look up Elon Musk Thailand tweets. Yeah, Thailand cave diver tweets.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Here you go.
There's an
Elon
apology.
Musk apologizes to Thai cave diver for Twitter attack.
Oh, God, here we go.
You know what? Don't bother showing the video. We will make one of the mini sub pod going all the way to Cave 5. No problemo.
Sorry,
pedo guy. You really did ask for it. So this is Elon Musk talking to one of the cave heroes.
Water level is actually very low and still not flowing. You could literally have swum to Cave 5 with no gear, which is obviously how the kids got in. If not true, then I challenge this dude to show final rescue video. Huge credit to pumping generator team.
Never saw this. See, this one's the one that's like, bro, come on. Never saw this British expat guy who lives in Thailand, parentheses, sus, at any point when we were in the caves. Only people in sight were the Thai Navy Army guys who were great. Thai Navy SEALs escorted us in, total opposite of us wanting us to leave. It's like, bro, he saved the kids though. You know, like, what are you talking about? We never saw the guy around. It's just weird. I don't know.
That is weird because he wanted it done his way, but got shitty because it didn't. That's...
Well, if you go into that last tab, it looks like it took him to court. BBC.com, cave diver tells court Elon Musk tweets humiliated him. Oh, was the other one?
Oh, not that one.
No.
This one.
No, the one below it.
Oh, the top one was BBC as well. I thought
Yeah. That's fair. This is only from the end of last year.
How long ago was the Thailand?
Sometime last year. 2018, June 2018. 2 years ago.
Yeah, well...
Yeah, he sent Tesla engineers in a small submarine to help free the boys, but it was never used.
So he had something.
Yeah, I guess he did. It says Mr. Unsworth later labelled it a PR stunt and suggested the billionaire could stick his submarine where it hurts during an interview with CNN. So, yeah. I guess Elon Musk just felt attacked by this guy, but at the end of the day, the guy did the job. You know.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And like I say, he just wanted it done because that would have been a huge marketing tool for him if they'd sent the sub in and it had done the job. You know, he'd be praised for that, and so would Tesla products, and it would just be good for business. So he's thinking about it from a business perspective, obviously being a business owner.
I mean, I just I don't know. I just kind of find it interesting with Elon Musk because in terms of being somebody who's actually impacted humanity from a day-to-day level, like the average person, he hasn't. You know, it's not that he's not doing things that aren't going to be important for the human race at some stage.
Space project and
But
Neuralink chips.
Yeah, it's like it's not really something that's changed the state of humanity on the planet as we live in it.
No.
You know?
And like the cars are probably the more, you know, user, you know, a product that is for the majority.
That is nameable for him.
But it's still the only advancement there is really having a computer in the car and making them go faster.
Yeah. It's like, I mean,
I'm not a Tesla expert either, so
yeah, but do you know what I mean? He's probably what, like, I don't know how old he is, 45, maybe a little bit older. He's got about 30 years, which isn't a massive amount of time to create something like that'll make him like an Alexander Graham Bell, or like somebody whose name you can be like, oh, that dude invented the telephone, or this dude. I'm not doubting him. I'm not talking shit on him. I'm not saying that he shouldn't aim for it, because a lot of people should be aiming for it. I just feel that it's a little bit weird how synonymous he is as a public figure. Like, a lot of people know who Elon Musk is, but why? Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of a broad sense.
Put on his platform because is he a billionaire?
Well, I mean, yeah, he is.
Multi-million-dollar
But
man.
being a rich person doesn't qualify or quantify you as impactful on the human race.
No, I'm not saying he is. I'm saying that's how people know, because people get told about millions. And again, he has a big presence on social media. And you know, he is creating, like, he had that flamethrower thing. People know him for just random shit he does on the side as well. The thing with that, though, because he does have so many ideas that are, whether they're good or bad for the future, he does actually produce them fairly quickly. Like, you think about how long ago it was since he talked about the idea of the chip. It was only a couple of years ago, and now here we are. He's doing demonstrations of it like that. That's not very long.
That's not to bash him at all. I'm not saying that he can't progress and make things quickly, but at the same time, you know,
I mean, I'm no
speed
Elon
is an
Musk
enemy
advocate.
of speed is an enemy of science, really, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Because you know, if we want to just throw it into another direction here, it's like kind of the conundrum behind a COVID vaccine. You know, it's like there's always going to have to be a test group, at some point. Vaping, there's always going to be a test point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just because something is rapidly developing doesn't mean it's rapidly developing in the right direction. You know,
that's true. Yeah, and you never really know what goes on behind the scenes with big corporations like that.
No.
And judging by his attitude towards situations like the cave thing, doesn't sound like he's hugely in tune with.
He's just a bit out of touch. Yeah, I just don't think he realizes / possibly doesn't care that it's kind of wrong to say that about somebody.
Yeah, for sure. He is your typical genius, though. Like, you look at people that have been labelled as geniuses, he's definitely like a genius. Obviously knows what he's doing, has the smarts to create all these products and that sort of thing, but is socially weird.
A little touch of the tism comes in every now and then.
Yeah, like you say, he's on the spectrum a wee bit, and it's just... Oh, it's obviously seems to be a stereotypical sacrifice that comes along with being very, very talented and entrepreneurial in that way.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, obviously there's been quirky people who have impacted arts and culture and science and whatever forever, but, you know, I mean...
But we're talking, you know, he's a bit ahead of everyone in terms of an intellectual...
I just think it's interesting the channels that you can go through in order to promote yourself. If you have the right amount of money and you have the right amount... If you have the correct image in terms of, you know, if you're seen as being... you know, for the people, I'm trying to think of the word here, not egalitarian. If you're seen as being somebody who is really looking for the best in humanity, you're looking to propel humanity forward, whatever, then you can do things that aren't admirable all the time, and still people can recenter your image and say, well, look, he's still building these rockets that go up to the moon or go to Mars and going to come back, like, you know. That's how people rationalise a lot of fucked up shit that happens in the world, you know? That's how a lot of people rationalise, a lot of messed up shit that's happened, like, you know, before it becomes a bigger issue. Like, you know, i.e. Kevin Spacey molesting people for 40 years. People being like, yeah, but American Beauty, though, or like The Usual Suspects, all these movies, House of Cards.
Yeah, that's a really weird concept that people can just... You know, it's like listening to a musician's music after they've been accused of something like that. You know, it's like, well, yes, they've done that bad thing, but I still really like their music. You know,
sure.
Does that become morally wrong, or do you just like it's a weird?
Yeah, I mean, we could go into this for a long time as well too. But like, you know, it's one of those things that like you, as much as you say you want to separate the art from the artist, it's very hard to watch a Kevin Spacey movie now and look at him and be like, bro, we all thought that this dude was one of the greatest actors of all time, and he was like fully sexually assaulting people for a long time.
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to watch the movie and not think of that.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
I was watching The Usual Suspects the other day because I'd never seen it, and I was like, this movie is hyped and it's always been a very good movie. Like who is Kaiser Sose, all that stuff. And I was like, well, I should watch this movie. And every time he was on, I was like, man, this dude's a good actor, but holy fuck,
cringe a
he's
wee
a
bit.
dark person.
Yeah.
Like,
It's weird. It's weird when those things come to light with guys like that. It just completely changes your perspective on who that person is, and sort of brings light to parts of their personality that might have already been a wee bit funny. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's just so odd that like what comes with it. In his case, like with sexual abuse, is that what it was?
Yeah.
With him,
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to sort of, I guess, hide that part of you because there's no necessarily defining characteristics in your personality that would make you think that you were doing that thing or were that kind of person.
yeah.
But there's no real telltale sign aside from, I guess, events that have transpired or places they go or people that they're around.
Yeah.
It's so weird to hear those stories.
Things that rely on, victims coming forward. It's such a strange sensation that we've probably had to deal with in the last 25, 30 and current. Because there's always been people that you're kind of like, this dude's pretty fucked. Like publicly in an eccentric, like human condition way. Like you watch somebody and you're like, this guy makes me uncomfortable. Like there's nothing, he's not doing anything. He's not doing anything. Like, okay, a good
There's
example.
definitely some seedy folk out there.
For sure. And a good example of this was the other day I was at St Kilda and just talking to some friends and they were about to go into the surf and stuff, and a guy came across us completely covered head to toe in camo gear with army boots on and an ammo belt around his belt. White guy, about between 28 and 30, big bushy beard, really dark look on his face, determined, like walking quite close to us. And in my mind, as I was looking, I was like, fuck, is this guy like, is he a public shooter? Like, just in my mind, I was like, I could feel my body tense up and me get kind of straight, and this weird urge in the back of my mind to be like, I should just run in the other direction right now. Even though this guy's done nothing, he hasn't done anything to look. I mean, apart from looking kind of unsafe and being dressed in camo in the middle of a beach, like. But then when he went away, I spoke to, Harry and my mate Jim. I was like, did you just see that guy dressed in camo? They're like, yeah, I felt really uncomfortable. They're both like, I felt really uncomfortable. Like, I felt like he was potentially going to pull out a gun and try to shoot us kind of thing. Right. But that's based on nothing. That's just based on like the notion. It's like, well, a shooter might look like this, might be a white guy, like an angry looking white guy dressed in army camo. It's just the fact that he was just, normally I'd be a completely liberal person in terms of being like, a person could have a friggin' turd on their head, and I probably, if they're walking past the street, as long as they didn't bother me, I don't care. Like, like I'd be like, wow, that's pretty bizarre. This dude just had a turd on his head and he's walking down the street with, like someone just plopped one right on him. But I wouldn't like stop and be like, oh, like maybe I should run in the other direction. But this was just kind of like, it almost felt like all of the little elements.
Get away from the turd, man.
All the little elements,
Yeah, well, that's pretty. It's interesting that, the fact that someone dressed in. Would you say it was army gear or was it just camo gear?
No, it wasn't army gear because Harry asked me this yesterday. He's like, oh, maybe he's in the army, and I was like, well, no, Harry, because you don't. Even if you're in the army, you're walking around in your dress uniform. Like he was wearing the uniform that you would wear if you were on an exercise or you were actively in a combat zone. Like he was fully. It was like something that he would buy from Arc Rights or something like that. Like a full camo get up. I've been around people who are in the army or in the military, and he was not in an army uniform.
So you could tell, you specifically.
Yeah,
could tell.
yeah. But that's what freaked me out about it, because if he was in an army uniform, I probably wouldn't have really flinched, because I would have been like, oh, he's in the army. But because he looked like somebody who was trying to look like he was in the army, that's what gave me a kind of like, this guy's looking for combat.
But for you have that sense of what is off about a person that is dressed in gear like that, whereas like Harry's saying, oh, you were saying to the guys were you scared as well? And they're saying yes. Might not like, I would have probably seen that and really honestly not thought twice about it unless you kind of can't get the aura about someone. Unless you're there in
What's hard to
person. But explaining that to me,
convey.
it's like, well, it's not like I haven't seen anything like that before. But it's interesting that sort of the initial reaction or feeling towards someone dressed in that gear is negative when typically people that are dressed like that are people that are in the army, you know, are supposed to be people that are
protecting
there to protecting you.
But that's the thing, is that's why it's been such a weird, and it popped out of my head there, because it was like this weird sort of dilemma within myself where I'm like, man, I thought that I was quite open-minded about people's appearance, because I've been in lots of scenarios where people would be completely people could be nude around me and I probably wouldn't be as phased as the average person would be, like just from the way that I am. But that one kind of just made me rethink it and be like, well, actually, this guy didn't do anything wrong. He didn't say anything or do anything. But automatically now, if I was to conjure up the image of that person in my head, it would reignite that kind of feeling of uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's definitely looks and ways of aspects of people's personality that played into a stereotype, and I guess in that case it did appear as though he was threatening in some way. But there's still an aspect to shock, like whether you accept someone for what they're wearing or what they're not wearing or not. There's still an aspect of shock and sort of that time to figure out your feeling. Like you say, you wouldn't really care if someone was walking naked around, but like you would if you're walking down the middle of town and someone's just naked. You'd turn your head and sort of go, okay.
It's all contextual, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I agree with the sentiment that people should be able to wear what they want and feel comfortable. I don't care what people wear most of the time. But
but that's from like a fashion judgment side. Yeah. Not from a fashion judgment side, but if you were to see something, you're like, oh, I don't think I'd wear that. That's the thought process you're having. You're saying, I don't think I'd wear that, not they shouldn't be allowed to wear that.
Yeah,
Whereas that's the same thing where I was like, you know,
threatening.
He can do what he wants, but maybe it's just the change in consciousness in New Zealand and globally, where just things like the mosque shooting and things like that, I would never, 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have batted an eyelid at that guy walking around. But now it's like, well, this has come to New Zealand. This is something that exists everywhere.
Yeah. I think sometimes with people that dress like that, I think some people just like to have the attention. Not necessarily whether they're threatening or not, but just he probably liked the fact that he was dressed like that and probably liked that he perhaps made you think that way. Perhaps went into, leave their house that day or whatever other day and goes, I look intimidating. I like that feeling of people being scared about me or power, it's a power trip thing, but not necessarily, well, that's the thing, you don't know whether they'll do something or not, but it's just interesting that.
Well, that thing definitely exists, because I've known people in the military that, obviously coming from a military family, that would wear military uniforms in scenarios where other people in the military would say that they shouldn't do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like someone who might be, on leave off of a ship, and they're walking around wearing their action working dress or their dress uniform. It's like you don't actually have to do that when you're off the ship. You can wear whatever you want. It's your leave. But some people will choose to wear the uniform because it's like being a policeman. It's something that they identify with, and there's a certain stature and a certain posture and a certain thought process that goes behind being a member of any in-group, really, but particularly noticeable in the military or the police force, or people trying to pretend they were in the military or police force.
Right. Sorry, you might have just said this, but I'm just going to ask again just for clarity. So if you're in the army and you have an army uniform, what entitlement do you have to wear that at any one time?
You can wear it whenever you want.
You could go out and do your daily errands.
You're not supposed to wear it in scenarios that would jeopardize the integrity of the military. So if you were to wear your number one uniform to a party or to a club, you'd get reprimanded and possibly potentially charged with something by in terms of by a company commander or whatever. But if you just walk in the streets, you could wear it when you like. The only times it's hard, it's contextual. But like you could wear it wherever you like in like a basic. Sorry, keep hiccuping. In a basic sense, but the kind of critique that you get from other people in the military would stop you from doing that. You know what I mean? If you're just a private New Zealand Army and you start walking around downtown Christchurch in your number one working dress, and you went back to the barracks, the other dudes would be like, "Dude, you're a fucking idiot. Like you're a poser. What are you up to?"
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
So it's more of like a pressure from the in group itself rather than because people who aren't in the military might just see you and be like, oh, you know, that guy's in the military.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot more of that dynamic in the army and military as opposed to police forces. It seems as though there's more of that sort of integral. You know, there's an aspect of it based around your maturity, I suppose, and your outlook on the army seems to be perceived in a certain way when you're brought into that rather than police officer. I get no expert, but that just seems like I don't think that's an example we could use here, but like definitely in America, it seems as though like the military and those forces are definitely more taught to be a certain
to be
way,
public as well.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas there's not so much.
But that also has
police
its, and particularly in Commonwealth nations, you don't really notice as much. But not really in many nations as much as the United States. But stolen valor it is a thing in New Zealand and Australia. People would tend to be veterans. People buy deceased people's medals and wear them in public to get benefits or whatever. But it's a huge thing in the United States, like a massive thing. Like you could go on stolen valor websites. There'd be stolen valor Reddit, stolen valor websites. There'd be thousands of cases where people would be wearing an army uniform with 4 Purple Hearts, a Medal of Honor, a troopship badge, just all kinds of stuff that you couldn't feasibly get, and they might be 30 years old.
Yeah, right.
And other people will come over and they go, "Why are you wearing that? Take that off." Like, no people that died wearing this stuff, fuck you, kind of thing. And that's because the American culture has been propagated to acknowledge those people and allow those people who are genuine to be acknowledged in public. You might go into a store with a uniform on, you might get a 25% discount. So people who want to be part of that in-group will pretend or lie without having any knowledge or forethought or thought of consequence. Just grab some random uniform you could get at any kind of thrift store, buy some medals from a deceased estate auction and just throw them on, you know. There's videos you can find easily of people being confronted in malls and people being like, dude, you know you're wearing a Germany and France star from 1945 and you're 25?
Yeah.
Well, what the fuck are you doing? And they'll be like, actually I served, I was SASNO.
Yeah, right.
Like that. You know? So, I don't know. It's
How do you feel about, okay, so like the veterans discount that applies to anyone that's been in the military, is that correct?
I'd imagine you'd have to show a military ID, but yeah, I'd say so. I don't know if it would. I don't know. I haven't seen it personally in the United States, but
No.
I'd say it would depend on the store.
How do you feel about someone that has been in the army and has served in some kind of war or has served in whatever capacity where their life's been at risk or their group has been at risk versus a person who has been part of the military but has only ever been part of a training regime, never really gone out to any sort of, I'm not sure what you call it.
Didn't leave New Zealand or didn't go on, just went on exercises and didn't go into operational war zone kind of thing.
Yeah, but have the same attitude that they're entitled to everything that a veteran is entitled to.
Well, that's
Sure,
happens.
there's people like that.
Yeah, it happens 100%. Because, yeah.
Like
I
there
think,
comes a point where just being in the military can't have just give you an automatic sense of entitlement just because you've been part of a military
For sure.
and not served in any way.
For sure. Well, I mean, yeah, it's like anything really, isn't it? It's like, you get a certain, for veterans benefits, you get a certain disability rate based on, what you're affected by. So like, say, my dad has like over 100%, what they call over 100% disability, which is not to mean that he can't physically function himself, but he is qualified or he is recognised to be applicable to a whole bunch of services because he has certain health conditions that have been caused by being in the military, e.g. like tinnitus from being too close to gunfire, skin cancers from being on deck or below deck, like months at a time. Those kind of things are considered to have to be paid back as part of the service because that's just how a government makes sure that people stay in the military, basically.
Yeah.
If they're not looking after you when you're old and you're suffering all the effects of being younger, then why would anybody be in the military? But it's true that there are people who will go in and, there's guys that might be my dad's age that he knew and he'd be like, well, this guy's just fucking, he was in for as long as I was, but every time they asked him to go somewhere, he would have an excuse and he'd just bail out, like he just wouldn't go.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's bound to be people, especially in America, where I say especially America a lot, but that's just where the examples of these things come from when I think about it. But people that have gone into the army or military or whatever, for that reason alone. Like, right, well, I have a sense of entitlement, or I'll
Yeah.
have this, you know, crown put on me after I've served in this service, which is seems backward.
That's why they do it. To continually propagate the military-industrial complex. Because if you ingratiate all the children that are growing up to go, you know, if I was your dad, right, and I didn't serve in the military, I'm some 35-year-old guy, you're my 7-year-old kid, and I say, hey, son, let's go down to the bloody Los Angeles Raiders football game this afternoon. You go, fuck yeah. So I'll take you there. For the first hour and a half, you're just bombarded with American flags, military personnel, people in military personnel getting respect, saluting the troops, fucking jet planes flying over, shooting blue, white, and red, like, you know, paint or whatever, you know, just some sort of aerial display. And you're just going to look at that from that age and be like, holy crap, this is amazing. Like, look, these people are superhuman. These people are superheroes. And once it's in, it's very hard to get out. And, you know, that's why, you know, say the level to join the military isn't particularly stringent, you know, like in a lot of countries, you know, you don't, obviously because it's a physical role and you can be taught the knowledge that they require you to know. But if there was like a more stringent basis to join the military, I feel like the military would be a lot smaller. But they purposely keep it open to people who are borderline psychopaths, borderline not really invested in anything except for being in the military because they know that that's their bread and butter, you know. Like in the United States, they'll allow recruiters to come into like high school and sign kids up. Like some 16 or 17-year-old kid, he's got no fucking clue what he's up to.
Yeah, you think that's just for like in times where war was present and they were recruiting people for war, it sort of made sense to appeal to as many people as you could, as young as you possibly could, just for numbers rather than actual skill. Like I feel like you wouldn't really go out of your way to say to school kids, we want you to join the army.
No, I think
for
that
a physical, you know, reason. Not that kids in high school age aren't capable of being in that capacity, but surely you sort of, I guess you got to start training people when they're younger as well.
I think this is a relatively new sensation though, like a sort of post-Vietnam thing, because Vietnam War, Korean War, World War II, they just drafted you. You didn't have a choice.
Right.
You get a letter and they'd say, show up to your draft board for your physical, and when you pass your physical, we're fucking shipping you off to Fort Knox, you get 2 or 3 weeks training, then you're off to Vietnam. That they just know that there was such a backlash from that. The only way to, like, for the military to really rescope after that is to just do underhanded things. Target kids in high schools. They have to become a broader recruiter because if the military, especially the United States, if the military could have it their way, the draft would still be a thing.
Right.
You just be drafted. Because a lot of countries you do get drafted. Singapore, Israel, 3-year compulsory service kind of thing. But those are because those are small manageable places and they haven't had a Vietnam kind of scenario. So now the recruitment, the draft has been shifted to actually being, you know, elements of video games like Call of Duty or public displays of love for the troops or just that kind of stuff, you know, stuff that's more subtle but still pretty openly propaganda and convincing you to join the draft or to join the army rather than be forcibly conscripted. Because if there ever was another war scenario like that for the United States and probably for the rest of the world, I don't think they'd hesitate to conscript people if they had to.
No. Well, that's the thing. It's a numbers thing. You need people. Like, I can't imagine there's many people joining the army these days as there were 50-some years ago.
But that's because there's no longer the actual intricacies and technology of warfare have changed where, you know, you could be in an alternative world, an alternate universe. You could be at the same... You can be in a room exactly the same as this with your laptop right there, but instead of interviewing me through a microphone, you're using a joystick to control a drone strike that kills 15 people in Afghanistan that don't even know you're coming for them. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So in terms of weaponry,
there's just no need. There's no need to line up the troops and teach them to do drill and make them fight in the jungle anymore because they want to kill you. They will just send a machine to kill you from the sky. Like they won't. The only time they'd ever really require a draft or like a mass warfare kind of scenario would be if for some reason we ran out of all the technology or we used all the nukes and somehow the world's like a decent amount of the world's population survived and you're actually just back to fighting sticks and stones kind of thing. Because that's a famous like Albert Einstein quote. He said, you know, I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Right.
Because there just wouldn't be anything left to fight for or about. Like,
Yeah, that's so interesting, eh? So
Yeah.
it sort of feels like that's the way the world's heading. In
Yeah.
a really grim sort of
well,
aspect. I mean, once we start letting nuclear bombs go and things like that, if there's zero capacity or reason for that to happen, like it's not really
Yeah.
something.
well, that's what's called, I guess, is the kind of global nuclear deterrent, is the idea that everybody is in agreement that the next time that an atomic weapon is used will be the last time. Because as soon as one's fired, everyone would just use it as justification to fire everything, you know.
Yeah,
If the United States was to fire at China or China was to fire at Russia, then the United States would be like, hey, look, China fired at Russia. Bam, 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 bam. Just spam all the missiles you can. Just wipe Russia and China out at once.
Jesus.
But as soon as Russia and China knew that they were getting fight at, they just bam, bam, just hit all the
Same
buttons,
thing, yeah.
send them in all the directions.
Yeah.
Like, fuck those guys.
Jeez.
But I mean, you know, you can think about that for like that has been that as a concept has been a thing since literally since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That has been a thing. As soon as people saw that happened, they're like, well, this is something completely new in human history. You know, they're teaching children in schools in the 50s and 60s, if there's an atomic attack, hide below your desks. Like, fuck, that's not going to help you. The whole building's going to get ripped out of its foundations.
Yeah,
like,
well, that's not like techniques that they're teaching kids to save themselves from these things. It's more like, right, giving them something to do rather
before
than
they
panic,
die.
you know.
Of course, but that's the thing. That shows you how ingrained this is in the kind of human consciousness, is that 65 years ago, you could look at training films of kids being taught, you know, the communist Reds are trying to drop bombs on us. That means we get under our desks and we all say the Pledge of Allegiance, just like shit like that, you know.
It's so ironic, eh?
Whereas then that's still completely a thing. The concept of it, it's just that the parties that are involved in that whole kind of potential conflict, have shifted. And also, you know, there's a lot of other gnarly shit going on in the world, e.g. global warming, capitalism to the extreme, economic corruption, spying. That's all the crap. All of the warfare that's probably going to go on until the world overpopulates. I feel like the kind of warfare that's going to take place, and is no, that's all good. I'm just flicking it a bit. It's got more hair now. That's why. The actual warfare that's going now is all economic and psychological and rigging elections and faking videos using deep fake and all that kind of stuff. The only time, well, not the only time, I can't say this completely with, you know, certainty, but the most logical time I would see that a conflict would happen where we'd be back to like fighting each other physically would be if we just overpopulated and food sources just got like, you know, overpressurized and you actually physically had to go out into the streets and fight other people to gather food, or you had to physically invade other countries to, you know, turn Australia into some sort of massive farmland or something like that. You know?
Right.
That would be the only time that New Zealand would probably get bothered in a global conflict, would be if, I don't know, if China decided that they were going to evoke, you know, an imperial Japanese World War II kind of mindset where they just wanted to make a big kind of co-prosperity sphere across the Pacific that was ruled by them. The only reason they'd bother Australia or New Zealand would be to take our resource, or to force us to farm, or to force us to use the fertility to supply China, etc., etc.
It's so crazy to think about a situation like that where you could just take over like a country.
It'd be so
like,
easy here.
It's so easy to think about, like when you look at the countries on their own. Like if you just were to say Japan's going to take over New Zealand, and then you think about like the population and just like the people involved in that task to take over an island that has 5 million people sitting in it, and we're just going to come in and take over. Obviously, like I realise there's ways in which doing it, but in terms of what that is and that literal description, like it's just a crazy ideology.
It is. It's funny. Like just sometimes every now and then at a party, or just when you're younger, you'd be like just having these conversations, and someone would be like, "Oh, if New Zealand got invaded, I'd just go Vietnam on. I'd go guerrilla. I'd go into the mountains. I'd fight them off like that." It's like, well, I don't know if you realise, but you know, Afghanistan has been pretty consistently fucked by other countries for like, you know, 50, 60, 100 years, and they're still around and they're still fighting, but like it's destroyed their spirit as a collective society. You know, you don't think of Afghanistan as like a singular nation. As soon as a nation tried to invade New Zealand or turn this into like a place for warfare, everyone would just isolate, and it just turned into a grind. It literally just turned into a 20 year kind of war, unless they just carpet bombed the whole place or something,
Jesus.
I don't know.
It's a scary thing what countries are capable of doing,
It is.
What means are there to do what things and how it's going to...
It's important to be aware of those things, but it's also important not to let them bog you down or to overthink them. Because, I'm not saying particularly that you might, but I've met a lot of people, and sometimes even myself get really concerned,
Well, if you look at something like, like a nuclear bomb or, say, an asteroid that was going to hit the world, I don't worry about those things, because the reality is, if there's a massive asteroid that's heading our way and it's going to destroy the Earth, you'll just die. You can't worry. If it'd be that quick to wipe everything out. You probably know it's on your way and you're going to freak out then. But it's why bother trying to get away? It's inevitable things like that. They're just going to happen. You're just going to be gone. It's not going to.
Yeah, well, that's almost one of the concepts about death, really, that I think is quite important. Is that in the grand scheme of things, there was always a time when you didn't exist. Do you know what I mean? In the history of the planet, there was always a time. Just when I think about it, when I've seen people, pass away that are close to you, it's obviously very sore and hard to deal with in the moment. But when you look back on it, and you're kind of well, what was the whole crux of their existence about? You're just basically looking at it there was a given time that you existed in, and you just made your best with that, because there was a even larger given time where you didn't exist. So all death is going to be is just the same state as when you didn't exist beforehand. You know?
And these days existence is honestly really a bit more meaningless, because when humans were, if you were to take it right back to when humans were, I don't know the word for, before we were really proper conscious beings.
Pre-developmental kind of stage.
The purpose of life is to, we're in the post-advanced side of humanity.
All the work's been done.
Exactly.
All the work to continue the human race.
That's right.
Or to develop it. Obviously,
that is the reality of choosing what to do with your life. Is what do I want to do or be? How am I going to live it? Not how do I necessarily provide to the. We've gone pretty far. We've probably gone too far to be honest.
But that's
and overpopulating as well. There's so many more people in the world now than there ever was, and it's God.
I guess that's where the Elon Musk kind of centric view of things continues, is where you're the developmental stage of human of human history hasn't ended. Because you could take that other stance and look at it and be we only think that's ended because we've been able to look back historically and see that 10,000 years ago humans were communicating with grunts and just at a very basic level without much societal kind of nuance or subtlety or whatever. Whereas, 10,000 years from now, they might be listening to this recording and be how stupid are these people that they didn't understand the grander spectrum of the universe? How stupid are they that they thought that the Earth was the centric hub for all of humanity? Because it might not be, But it's I don't know. I guess it all depends, really, doesn't it? And that's the whole battle with it all. Is if you're not in a position to actively, force those developments into being. If we're not Elon Musk or somebody of Elon Musk's ilk with the financial backing and just the desire to force through cultural norms and just push ahead, then there isn't a whole lot of point to dwelling on it, ruminating on it forever, because it's never going to know the answer.
It's the age-old saying, isn't it? Life's too short to worry about shit like that. And you really just have to do what you're...
But it's not wrong to inspect those things, because that's what the whole
part of
ability...
human nature too.
The whole ability to formulate those concepts in the first place is what makes us different from any other species on the planet, or any other species in the universe that we've ever come across.
It's weird to think that we are the only... I'm not sure how to actually define consciousness yet, but when I say it, I mean it in a particular way. It might not actually make sense, but it's so odd that we are the only real conscious being that we sort of know of. It's funny to think that there isn't actually another life form on Earth that actually communicates in, obviously other animals communicate, but there's no intelligent being that has sort of moved up alongside
It's
us.
because we
you know?
killed them / interbred with them, you know. Like Homo sapiens, I saw another article yesterday actually even about, some people theorize there's up to 4 different types of human-like subspecies, Neanderthalis style, Homo habilis, whatever, that coexisted with humanity at some stage, that we either probably warred with or interbred with or just developed with. So that, you're right, that it is pretty crazy that we haven't come across that level again. But at some stage there was, and without our ability to control it, it became homogenous and just kind of mingled into some sort of formation of what we are as human beings now. But at the same time, there's other people that theorize that we should actually stop expanding outwards into space. You know, some people are like, some scientists are saying, you know, because the Earth is constantly transmitting. It's constantly transmitting. Satellites are constantly transmitting. That like golden disc, we should talk about that actually. We call that that record they made out of gold and sent into space. Basically, just has video clips of just or like audio clips rather of like famous songs, famous pieces of art, things like that, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of proponents against that. A lot of people who were saying we shouldn't do this because we're telegraphing our existence to a potential being that would be greater than us. You know, if we are sending out messages to develop contact with some other form of life, right? If we don't have the ability to approach them, and they approach us, they've started on the front foot. That means that they have the ability to travel at great distances, communicate with us, and conceptualize that communication, you know? So that would actually be quite a dangerous thing, some people think, because they could view us the same way that we view stock animals, the same way that we view other species that live on Earth, like cows, chickens, things that have been literally, their whole existence is formulated into servitude and death. There could be another life form that could, you know, not actually recognize our intelligence or our ability to communicate as intelligence because they've advanced so far past that point that they don't have touch with that. Do you know what I mean? So like our existence is we have sort of, some people might have a kind of compassion for people of the past or animals that live on the planet now, but a lot of people also don't because they're so far removed from the initial point of when we decided what was right and what was wrong. So whatever species comes into contact with the planet might be so far removed in their timeline, might be so far removed from the acknowledgement that other species are worth coexisting with that they might either just destroy us outright or just utilize us to serve their own needs. And if they were to take our communications and be able to decipher them and return communication to us, it might take us 1,000 years to even get close to figuring out what their response was.
But don't you think a being like that is already there? If we only have to send something out into space for someone to recognize that we're there, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I feel like if someone has the event, like, is that in tune with,
it's hard with this because it gets deep.
Yeah, dude. Well, what I'm thinking, like, so where is this golden disc like going? Are they just shooting it up into the atmosphere?
Well, I mean, we should look it up so we have proper sort of
just trying not
insight
to pull
about
up
it.
too much because it takes away the
Yeah, no, I understand that. But
what is it?
I can get to just look up golden disc shot into space. Yeah, I think it might be Voyager. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, it's called the Voyager Golden Record. So they launched it in 1977, bro. So it's been in space for 43 years.
Oh, they've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that was much longer than I thought. Yeah, I just think that it's okay. I just want to see how far it's going.
It says, although neither Voyager spacecraft is heading toward any particular star, Voyager 1 will pass within 1.6 light years distance of the star Jalise 445, currently in the constellation Camelopardalis, in about 40,000 years. So it's a long way from Earth, but it's going to take 40,000 years for it.
Played only if there are advanced free-faring civilizations in interstellar space with the launch. So they're saying...
See, Carl Sagan said that. So that's kind of the same thing that I'm talking about, is that they'd only be able to play the record if the civilization that received it
has
was
the
at a
means
high
to
enough
actually-
means to
Right.
actually recognise what we're saying. So
But that kind of helps me explain what I was trying to say, because I feel like if there is such a being, presumably they've gone out and grabbed that thing. Like it hasn't just sort of fallen onto their lap. Something that's in
no,
orbit
they'd have
like
to
that.
retrieve it.
Yeah, so
And they could
wouldn't you
retrieve it
think that
destroyed.
wouldn't you think that a being that is able to do that probably knows and is close enough to where that is, because that can't be too far from us, would probably already know about us anyway?
Well, I guess what this is saying is that because it's not passing in any particular direction, right? It would take 40,000 years to pass within 1.6 light years distance of the star. So if it was to exit our galaxy or into another universe, I guess I get what you're saying. Like if they had the ability to collect it and retrieve it, that would mean that they would be advanced enough to decipher it. But at the same time, it's like kind of a bottle in the ocean sort of theory where you've thrown it out into the cosmic void. Just because it's in space doesn't mean it will get retrieved in space. It could land on a planet.
That's not really my point. So this thing here is information about us
Cultural
as
information.
as a planet, and
Yep.
that's being sent out to potentially be found by others, other civilization to find out about us. So what I'm saying is that if there is such a civilization out there that is able to grab that and retrieve that, they probably already know about us.
No, not necessarily. They would just receive that. It could be comparable to the pyramids, a pyramid scenario where we are intelligent enough to know what the pyramids are, but we haven't reached the point where we can definitively tell you where the pyramids came from, who constructed them, and why. So this gold record, they could receive it, and they could decipher it, and they could have a broader understanding of it. But that wouldn't mean that they'd be completely correct about where it came from or why. Do you know what I mean? So like they could, I'm going to assume that these kind of etchings on the record would have messaging in a scientific sense that they would be able to decipher, right? But that doesn't mean that they could understand the human bias or the human aspect to science.
Well, what is this? So I don't know what this is.
This
These
is the
pictures
cover
on
of
here?
it. This is the cover of it. So my guess is that if we actually even go back to the article, it might tell us the content. So if you go content and images, so yeah, I mean it says here like the golden record carries an hour-long recording of the brain waves of Andrian. So
like how do we? Okay, so it is a
it's
record. we
shaped
would
like
put
a
into
record. No, you wouldn't play it on a record player.
So
It's made of solid gold.
So what? I don't understand. How do we even know what's on there?
Well, if
I
you
can't
go,
look at that and decide.
No.
what's
Well,
on
if you
there.
go, this is the cover of it. Okay, so this is, imagine it's in a big tin. That was on the front cover of it.
Oh, it's like a box.
That's the record inside of it, and then the next image is the cover of the box or whatever it's
Yeah.
contained in.
See, but you can't actually play that record as a record.
No,
So
no. It wouldn't. Well, you can play it as a record, but you couldn't play it on like a traditional Earth turntable, if that makes any sense.
So
if
how
you,
are we? What?
if you cut out of it, and you go back into contents. So like basically here it goes. It says it's the selection of it took almost a year. So Carl Sagan was involved with it, and there's 115 images and a variety of natural sounds such as those made by surf, wind, thunder, and animals, including birds and whales. They chose it from different cultures and eras, spoken greetings in 55 ancient and modern languages, including spoken English by the UN Secretary General, other human sounds like footsteps and laughter, and a printed message from the US President. It basically just like, that's why,
But so how would we play this content here?
well, we wouldn't play, okay, what the problem is, it's a multimedia item. So we're thinking about the fact that it's called the Golden Record is what's getting confusing. It's not a record in the traditional sense of a musical
No,
record.
I get
it's
that,
it's
but
a
like-
record, a recording.
So okay, so say okay, this doesn't make any sense to me. So what would you actually physically obtain if you had this thing? Like if it's not a playable record, all this content that they're saying that's on here, how do you actually?
Go into this.
How would we traditionally listen to it?
Go into this image here. That's the record there on the front of the capsule.
Right.
So we wouldn't traditionally listen to it because it's probably very large and also significantly heavy. So there's nothing. It's kind of hard to explain it in a like.
I just don't understand how you can expect another a civilization to be able to play something that we can't even play on our own planet?
We can play it. We can play it. But the thing is, it was formulated and sent off the planet. So it was never designed to be played on the planet. So Carl Sagan and all the scientists put all of this information together with the idea that it would have like a almost phonetic style universal language that would be able to be deciphered by any kind of intelligent being. You know, at its simplest sense, all of these etchings inside of the recording would be played on a device or on a harmonic, or even if you just scratch something along the surface of it, it would give you reflection. It's kind of like how an old phonograph record works. You know, it's literally just the little grooves inside of the record that you put a certain kind of element against it, and it will display that information back to you. It's quite hard. It is quite dense. It's quite hard to explain.
Yeah,
and like because there's just nothing really like it on the planet, if that makes any sense.
So it's just it's weird to think that you can cultivate something that is translatable to generations that aren't necessarily there, you know. When you're trying to create a universal language, we've kind of already done that. Why not just put our way of, like, you could literally take the record from that, put it on a record player, and you'd hear something.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense if we couldn't, because then how would anyone else make any sense of it?
I mean, you could even just try Google it. You should just say, how would you play the golden record?
I'm not going to try and find information that I need
Yeah.
to. I mean, I'm not going to do it myself.
But you know what I mean. Like, if you think about it, this was launched in 1977, right? So I guess it was just something that they formulated at the time to be
it
like.
Seems like it's more of just a novelty thing.
Okay, look at Playback 3.
The upper left-hand corner of the drawing.
So there's a drawing of the phonograph record and the stylus carried with it. The stylus in the correct position to be played. Okay, so they also stored the ability to play the record with the record. So whoever collects it can play it on what it was sent with.
Right, that makes more sense.
So that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? See,
okay. There's the thing there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just them printing it. Yeah, that makes more sense, because that was what I was trying to get my head around. How can we send a record out into the world if it's not even a record that we can play here?
Yeah.
That's how it was coming across.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess with that information, it's telling us that they created the ability to play it.
Yeah, surely you can put that on a record player and hear
well, that's obviously a replica of it.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
This disc is a duplicate of those carried on the 2 Voyager spacecraft. Yeah. But I mean,
I think it's silly.
Well, I think it's pretty freaking cool. It's just
it's neat.
It's just whether it would ever actually, it's one of those things that's just, you never know if it will ever actually be anything. You know, that could be the thing that 40,000 years from now makes contact with the rest of the world. We could be destroyed. We could be completely destroyed. The Earth could be completely destroyed. It's just sort of a time capsule in space at worst, and at best, the tool that allows us to communicate with another technology.
So it's a tool to relay our history for perhaps our inevitable doom to another civilization that is able to. It seems. I just don't really care much about things that aren't going to happen in our lifetime. Like something that, like, no.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm
But
kidding.
like,
That was a joke, people.
Yeah. But like in 40,000 years, it's like, oh, that's great, but fuck it, who fucking cares? Like,
That's why you're not a scientist, though, because you've got to see a bigger picture.
Exactly. Yeah, I get it, but I mean it's just like, okay, well, that's
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
As sentimental beings, like something, it's a nice thought, but we're never going to experience that reality of some other, we're never going to actually know if anyone ever comes across that. We could have just thrown some metal into
I guess the best case scenario is that they launched it in 1977 and somebody finds it tomorrow. And that's it only took 43 years. So the best case scenario is that somebody could be hurtling towards the Earth.
That's still going to be in our galaxy, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. But I guess the idea is that if someone was hurtling towards our Earth right now and they collected the record, and someone could be like, hey, the fucking record's been picked up and played, then we'd be like, oh, well, that means they're in our universe. That means they're probably coming towards us. That means we should try to contact them now before they come and kill us.
So again, that kind of comes back to my point. Like, it doesn't sound like an object that is going to leave our galaxy. So how would anyone, like if someone is there ready to receive that, they're already going to be inside our galaxy. They're probably going to know about our presence anyway.
If they were going to receive it soon, for sure. For sure. But they wouldn't know about our presence just because they're in our galaxy. The world is, our planet is a long way away from everything else. You know, they could be at the end of, they could be
people
Alpha
that are jumping
Centauri.
between galaxies probably have some pretty advanced technology.
For sure.
And we'll
That's
know
the
that there's
concept.
probably life within this galaxy that they're in.
That's the concept, is that maybe it's not a good idea to send out information to the reaches of our galaxy, because whoever can enter our galaxy probably has expanded past the point of having to contact other civilizations. Do you get what I mean?
And who's to say that the materials that we have used to create this thing are going to last in space for 40,000 years anyway?
I don't know, dude.
Jaina.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I just
I'm
find
not
the golden
against
record to be quite interesting, and it gave us quite a bit of material to talk about.
Yeah, it is interesting. I like it as a concept. I like the idea that there is. I like the thought in which there is someone out there that could pick that up, and the thought of other galaxies and other beings and stuff is very fascinating. I do get that. I just don't realistically see, aside from it being a novelty thing and the fact that we've just talked about, I don't really see the point.
No, well, it's just one of those things in the 70s that, people want a whole bunch of cocaine. They're like, hey, we should send this shit into space, man. Yeah. Using all these golds in our goddamn disco suits, man. Why don't we just get a whole bunch of it and send that shit into space,
That is such a
dog?
70s thing too. Had to be out of gold.
Well, I mean, it's probably the most malleable material, I guess, to go through space.
I suppose in terms of something
Not
that's going to
malleable,
listen to it, had to be a physical thing. Like you wouldn't send a USB drive into space.
I just imagine someone those old burnt CDs you used to do on the computer, with some Now 9 or something, and they just throw it into space.
Surely they'll
not
have
even on a
CD
rocket.
players.
Somebody's just standing at Cape Canaveral and they just get someone who's really good at throwing things. He just throws it as hard as he can. It just goes into the stratosphere.
Yes.
Aliens. I got it. I did it.
Imagine that. Imagine sending a USB drive or a computer or something into space and expect someone. The expectation that they would have the means in which to play that thing as well. It would make more sense to send one of those little handheld marimba thingies, like that, because at least they could pick that up and go.
What are they doing?
Rather than be like a flash drive, you would know what to do with that. You'd have to presume that they've also come up with a computer with a USB drive of the exact same.
They might not have hands though. They might just be using brain waves to start things. That was interesting. Just thinking about that dude throwing a CD. Just to completely change the topic because we've kind of run this one to the ground. Do you have a memory of anybody throwing somebody? Of anybody? Do you have a memory of your father throwing him? No. Do you have a memory of anybody throwing something really far? Do you have a definitive memory of somebody
I threw a vortex pretty far when I was kid.
Was it the furthest you've ever seen anybody throw anything?
It was one of those screamers, those whistle ones.
One of those just straight hooters.
Went pretty far.
Straight down the line.
Yeah. No, what do you mean?
I mean, do you have a I don't know, I just thought it was a random question.
Do I have a memory of someone
do you have a
throwing something
specific
far?
memory of someone throwing something so far that you were like, holy fuck, that dude threw the shit out of that thing?
Well, yeah, but not to an absurd level. I've seen, LeBron throw a basketball full court to the other side. It's pretty impressive.
I meant more in person. Do you ever see anyone at a park or anything just throw something and be like, bro,
I mean, I've seen some pretty impressive punts and throws in my time, but nothing that I've ever gone, Jesus Christ, this is Superman.
Yeah, right.
Why's that? Why do you
I just remember being quite young and seeing a guy throw an apple an extreme distance.
How
I'm
old
just
had you
wondering.
been?
Oh, probably 9. I'm just wondering if it was a massive distance or if I was just kind of holy.
Well, that's the thing. You're probably just a kid and go, wow. You did it so far.
Oh, wow. Did you ever...
Owen Wilson.
Did you ever get afraid when you were younger that you were just never going to get any older? Even though it made no sense? When I was younger, I was quite short and chubby and I was like... I'm going to be 4'5" and chubby for the rest of I'm going to be some sort of dwarf person. And there's no reason to think that. It was just kind of you'd come across somebody who's developed when we were younger, particularly in our friend group, someone who was quite tall. It was they might have been 5'9" or 5'8", and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
When's that happening to me?
I think growing older when you were a kid was definitely something that was hard to comprehend. I definitely knew I was going to get bigger. I definitely didn't expect to get as big as some of the biggest people that I'd seen. But just turning like 12 and then like, oh my God, I'm going to be 13 next year. Oh my God, I'm going to be 14 like the year after that. That's a weird thing. Now it's just like nothing. But yeah, aging when you were young, you never really thought you were going to be one of the big 16-year-olds in school or like being 18 and being able to buy booze. Like, fuck, that's so far away. But here we are.
Thinking you're going to be drinking and gambling, getting laid all the time. And then
what else do
only one of those things happened. I don't know. I just thought I was going to be some fat little dwarf hobbit man for the rest of my life, and I'm glad I didn't. You know, I was honestly, I'm amazed that I'm not fat. Like I just, some days I just almost can't comprehend it.
No, you weren't that fat.
No, I was pretty chubby. I used to.
But
It wasn't even like so much about being fat. It was just about like eating. Right. Like I would just destroy things. I'd have whole chickens. I'd have. Like whole chickens. Yeah, I literally. You ask anyone in my family, I'm famous for being like I was a terror. Like I would drink whole things of milk at dinners and like whole chickens.
Whole chicken?
Literally, my mum would make more food because they knew that I was going to demolish a whole chicken.
You made 2 chickens.
Oh yeah, I'm not even exaggerating. I would smash a chicken, bro. Like, yeah. Basically, I was just like a human garbage disposal.
Your mum made a whole nother chicken just she knew you would smash.
Yes, 100%. Not even exaggerating. I would eat like loaves of bread, bro, in weeks.
She can't let you do that.
No, well, she's just like, this is good. Like, he's going to turn into an All Black or something.
Bro.
Yeah, why? There was nothing wrong with that.
How old were you at this time?
Not that old, like 8 or 9. Why not? I was hungry. If you
can't let your 8-year-old eat a whole chicken.
Why? What's your logic to that? Why? Literally,
because it's like feeding your pet. You can't like overfeed your pet and just let it get fat. You know.
What are you
have
talking
to moderate
about?
How much people are eating?
Of course you do. But I was running around like a fucking mad dog, and you're developing every day. What? Okay, so no. Okay, this is unfathomable for me. So. The reason if your kid is running around like a mad dog and they're not getting super fit, like my kid's playing plenty of sports, he looks all good, he's eating a mixture, like the right mixture of shit. Why not give him bigger portions? What's wrong with that?
Definitely, I'm on board with the bigger portions, but you can't let an 8-year-old
I wasn't eating a whole chicken like every day.
No, but still, like you can't just say, oh, my kid's not getting fat, and sure he can eat a whole chicken, let him go.
You're talking shit about my mama here, mate. No, what?
No offense to Vicky, but you've come out a very bright young lad. But
no, honestly, I can't believe
that's crazy.
I
definitely believe. Like, okay, I
was just a madman.
It's just the whole chicken thing that gets it. Like, I definitely got to a point where I was eating bigger portions, and Mum let me eat bigger portions. But going, oh yeah, a whole chicken, you can eat that. I'll make you a whole chicken.
I think it's hard.
It's pretty incomprehensible.
It's hard to comprehend. If you need to ask like Ethan or like Nathan about me as a really young child. Yeah. It's almost hard to comprehend how spastic I was. Like not in like a stupid way. Yeah. Just like I had full blown ADD, ADHD levels of child development. Like if I wasn't sitting down and eating, or like sitting down and like focusing on something, I was just running around with my chin up, just constantly. Like the amount of childhood concussions I got, bro, because I would just run around. I'd just run into things. I'd literally just run into things head first, just knock myself out. And the teacher would be like, "Oh, Liam's gonna go." I have memories. I have very vivid memories of being in my school sick bay and the teacher being like, Liam's going to have to come home. He's knocked himself out on the playground again. And like just literally that kind of shit, bro. Multiple times, at least 10 times, if not more.
Well,
it's an impulsive thing, bro. Like eating was just to the max. Like eating sweet things to the max, running around to the max, singing or playing instruments to the max. Yeah. Yeah, well, I still have them, bro. Like sometimes I'll do things
in high
to the
school.
fucking
Like when
max.
I first met you in high school, there was definitely aspects of that in your personality.
Yeah,
but it wasn't as close to you then. But
I got better at regulating it though. Like
right.
because I got older and I was like, okay, first off, I'm coming off really obnoxiously because I'm just too balls to the wall. Like people probably just think I'm a friggin' weirdo. And the second one was like low key marijuana use. Kind of helped it in a lot of ways. Like it helped me slow down. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
In like a physiological way, not a mental way.
like a way of attention grabbing, or like?
Oh, 100%. But it was also like just the way that I am wired, you know.
Right.
I've got, borderline ADD tendencies in terms of a broad range of knowledge that I'll go really deeply into, and then I'll do something completely different, you know. The only things that are like constant for me is things like, music, singing, basketball, things that like are just really deeply ingrained love affairs, things that I will never change.
Sure.
But like the amount of times, it's in all kinds of bits of my personality, because I was always doing it for attention. Like you either want girls' attention or you want, I have this weird thing, bro, where I just want to impress people all the time, and it doesn't really matter. It's not like an ego thing, like I want them to think I'm cool. I just want them to think I'm not a dork. you know?
Yeah.
Like the amount of times people would like...
So rather than trying to build a personality on its own, you're trying to sort of
just be
mask an
broad
aspect of your personality. That's
or
not,
just be broad.
You're not comfortable with. Yeah, right.
Just be broad. Like, to me, there's things in my personality that I don't like, but rather than just like, that's where the ADD aspect takes over, I guess, is like, some people might just look at it and be like, oh, this is what you need to focus on. You just need to drill it. You just need to find these aspects that are wrong, just drill them bit by bit until you get rid of them.
But are they wrong?
Well, they're not wrong. They're just different. They're not wrong. They're just things that might cause eventual problems in one way or another. Like, like in high school, my problem with like relationship wise, and it's probably messed me up in some ways now. It hasn't messed me up, but it's put me on. I have to relearn some things when it comes to relationships or whatever. Is that I wanted so many people to like me that I wouldn't spend time, like proper time, with any one person.
Right.
So like I'd just be with one girl and then be like, oh, cool, they like me now, and then just go for another girl and be like, oh, they like me now, and then just all you're looking for was that first kind of initial, like, they liked me and are interested in me, and then now I can go and do whatever I want.
It's a pretty common mentality in high school, though. I think
for sure. I don't think that
overwhelming
now.
experience to start relationships and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't view that way. I'm not that way now at all. I'm definitely looking for a relationship now, but it's just I
dart around that. I mean, there's sometimes I think, it would be nice to be in a relationship, and then there's other times where I go, well, I just know that if I'm in that relationship, I'm going to want out of it. Like, I just know that's how it works for me. Like, you always want something that you don't have. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is a hard thing to get past, and I guess that sort of proves a relationship if you can commit to that one person. And
I just kind of always thought, I still think it now, I still battle with it now. When I was young, I was just like, people who are in these relationships are suckers, because I wasn't in them. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't getting the satisfaction of being with somebody who knew you intimately, properly. So I was just kind of like, well, these people are just being stupid because they're tying themselves down to one person, and then when they get the urge, because I just assumed that everyone was going through the same hormonal ADD-driven thing as me, where it's like, if I get the urge to do this, I have to do it, or I'll be biting my fingernails off, chomping at the bit. So like, to me, it was like, you find one girl attractive, or you like elements of the person. Not to say that I didn't listen or like take on board what they had to say, or take, acknowledgement of their feelings, because I did, and I still do. But there's something in me that was like, well, this thing has become appealing in somebody else. Chase that. And and it was like it was almost like a self validation thing, Like, I can remember even talking to people now in our high school, they'd be like, oh, I didn't think you'd be interested in a girl like, like, I liked you for a bit in high school. You're like, oh, cool. And like, then you're like, I didn't think you'd be interested in a girl like me because of this, and this, whatever. And I was like, that's what I hated. I was like, the whole point of why I was so much like this was because I wanted to experience a massive range of things to discover what I did like, and then you can bring it down to a core that you can decide on when you're older. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, that stuff just kind of annoys me now, because I'm looking back, I'm like, what was I projecting that made these girls think that I could be approachable?
Things like that in high school are so obsolete now, but at the time, like, you really didn't want to, obviously it's never right to hurt someone's feelings, but like, so many relationship stories and things that have happened to you over that 5-year span, even that 7-year span, if you count intermediate relationships, like, no one gives a shit about that stuff anymore. Like, unless it was seriously detrimental in whatever way to someone's mental health, or that it sort of played quite a serious part in how that person turned out to be. Like, a lot of those minuscule interactions, like, we laugh about it now. You see those people in town, and it's just something that's not really, like, seriously thought about anymore. So it's almost like that is the perfect time to really be doing that sort of thing, experimenting and figuring out what it is that you like and don't like, because realistically that person's feelings aren't really going to be hurt from that small relationship or interaction at that time 10, 15, 20 years from then, you know.
I think what was hard was going through experiences then that you wouldn't think of in a wider scale picture. Like, you know, signal you for more water.
Want some water?
Yeah, dog. Like,
Last bottle.
oosh, thank you. Like, there was a girl that I was seeing one of the girls in our friends group at the time when we were in like
Shocker.
you were like year 11 or 12 or whatever, right? And she was in my math class, and I kind of made it a point to never be rude to somebody if they, because you know how there was that weird clique thing going on in high school where people, I don't know, hung out in certain groups and then maybe they idolized you from afar because they thought you were cool or in with a group of people or whatever. I made it a point never to be unapproachable to somebody if they liked me or just wanted to talk to me, kind of thing. And this girl was quite liked me quite a bit. I didn't like her, and it wasn't for any kind of, you know, shallow reasons or anything. I just didn't really know her, and I just wasn't on track to be, you know, spending my time with her. And she used to be very forward about liking me, and I used to meet up with her because her home life wasn't very good, and, you know, just because she wanted to go out with me or, you know, liked me or whatever, didn't mean I did feel awkward because I'm like, oh, she's obviously experienced something with me, but I didn't stop contacting her. This is where I get myself in trouble, is I'll keep talking to them and I'll keep them in the mix, maybe to get them to a point where they think that I'm developing for them or whatever. But I would just hang out with her because, like, this girl she's not really hanging out with that many people, like, her home life's pretty rough, whatever. And then a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, she committed suicide. And I thought about it and was like, this is, like, really crazy now to deal with because I didn't think about how important those moments might have been to her at the time. And like, it was a really weird kind of dilemma thing for me because I was like, I'm proud of myself that I spent time with her and actually gave her the time of day to interact with her and get those things out. But there was another part of me that also was like, when I heard the news that she had killed herself, was like, man, if I had the ability to talk to her now with the knowledge that she was on that kind of path, then I might have gotten her out of that situation or spoken to somebody else, whatever, you know. But
Have you ever heard about this, Liam?
you know who she was. If I told you who she was, obviously I won't do that now. But
no.
yeah. So it's just those kind of scenarios. That kind of shit was just really interesting because that kind of forms how I approach things now, but it didn't at the time. And just one of those things that when you get a bigger picture scheme of things, you look back in your development kind of thing, you can see what kind of person you become or why.
Yeah,
but
it's pretty in my nature to, you know, not like you say, you want to sort of follow up and have that consistency and see where people are at in those situations. But yeah, there can be points where you want to break away, but you know perhaps what someone's like, and you sort of need to stay around because, or at least have it.
They're
play
taking
that bit and
comfort
come
from
to
you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can't really take that away from them, but you also, I mean, you never know when that shit's gonna happen.
No, of course. I don't like, don't get me wrong, I'm not making that about me because it wasn't.
No.
And the actual, you know, events that led up to that outcome they didn't involve me in the end. And I'm not pretending that they did. And it'd be wrong to me to pretend that they did. But I just remember really enjoying that feeling in an egotistical way in a lot of ways, because I kind of felt like, you know, oh, here I am, this girl's quite into me. I'm not copping flack from her because I'm not being a dick to her. You know, I'm not going out with her and I'm not giving her maybe the physical interaction that she needs or she wants from me. But at the same time, I can point to it later on and be like, you know, I was a gentleman about this or whatever. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that's a weird kind of psychology that goes on. I feel like where you're kind of thinking like, I'm going to be a nicer person for people to be around if I just treat everybody nicely. But I've also been in that kind of person's shoes where there might be a girl that you really want to verbalize, or like it's actually really important for you to try to make that effort or make something further happen, and it doesn't. Just naturally, it can't happen, or the other person isn't willing to, or whatever. Just whatever might play out, and you can't manifest those things into happening.
No.
So that was just an example of the shoe being on the other foot kind of scenario.
Yeah, you don't want to force things like that. But it's interesting. That's probably a really problematic situation in a lot of cases. Kids that age that don't really know or seriously think about someone that might be in that mindset and how to actually deal with that person. It's all just sort of, there's a lot of selfishness, I think, at that age.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that get treated poorly at that time because they sort of know none the wiser than the bully system that's in schools and how that's perceived and that sort of thing. Oh man, that's heavy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be like, you've got to put yourself first for a most part of it. But yeah,
It wasn't a case of
sorry,
like
terrible
no.
conversations.
I know it's not easy to just talk about out of the blue like that, especially without context. But it's just a funny thing to look back on, because now I'd like to think that if somebody was in that kind of mental state, whether they're a friend of mine or not, that I'd have a broader range of life experience to draw on to even make some kind of sentiment to help them, or to approach others, or have some sort of adult nous about me to go and be like, oh, well, this person is actually in this situation, they need help. But a lot of people, even, I like to say that, but a lot of people don't. You know, we've had a close friend of ours, or mine particularly, that committed suicide a couple of years ago, and I wouldn't have had. It's the same scenario. I wouldn't have had any inclination to have approached him because the forthcomingness just wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just something that you can't beat yourself up on. You hope that you're more aware of it in the future to look for signals for it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make you a clinical psychologist that can solve the problems.
Well, it's very easy to, and a natural thing to start thinking back on interactions that you've had with those people, and sort of really break it down and see what involvement you've had or things that you've said. You start to worry that you haven't done something that's drawn them to it, especially if they're a close friend of yours. But I mean, the reality is, like, it's something they were dealing with internally, and you can't presume that in everyone either. Like, you can't really go into every interaction being super, super delicate. Like, you can be a nice person, but you really don't know what's going to set someone off or do anything that's going to be, like, it's really no fault of anyone's, and there's definitely things to be aware of, but like, as a whole, I mean, it's pretty easy just to be nice. I think all it takes is, just the fact that you have been there and have talked to them, and whether you've said something bad or not, nothing is usually really your fault, and I guess you're never going to know, so you can't really lay blame to anyone or anything.
Yeah, you're right. It was just a kind of this funny kind of dichotomy where I was thinking about it at the time, and my mindset at the time was that I was almost patting myself on the back in a way. It's almost like, oh, like, Liam, look how what's the word? Chivalrous you're being. Like, look, you might be playing a fucking fool, getting pissed up, and probably pursuing girls in ways that you shouldn't do when you're younger because you just don't understand on a weekend. And then in the weekday after school, you're meeting this girl to talk to her about her family and essentially leading her on, but providing a support, So in my mind, it was kind of like, oh, well, I'm actually, I'm well rounding this female interaction thing, like, because I'm still going for what I want. On the weekends, I'm still pursuing physical goals or whatever, or experience goals, and then I'm doing the Good Samaritan thing of talking to this girl who has real problems. And then that's why, looking back on it now, I'd try to never make that mistake again, because it's like, it's not really so much that I did anything that contributed to it. It's just that I didn't actually place enough value on how important it was to actually be there for her as a person or as someone to talk to, just as a crutch rather than me needing something out of it, because at the end of the day, I was there listening to what she had to say and everything, but if someone was to ask me about hanging out with her, I'd be like, oh, I just hung out with her and we talked.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Whereas to her, it might be a lot more significant than that.
Yeah, and that's just being human. Like, you think most people would have that sort of inclination to help. Like, if someone's really, I suppose, asking you, is that the case that you were getting invited to hang out in that capacity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, she just asked me to go hang out at the park up
Yeah.
from my house, and I
mean,
just go to talk to her, and
yeah.
then think that I just, being egocentric and juvenile and fucking whatever. I just thought that maybe she'd invite me there to tell me how much she loved me or how much she wanted, wanted me to settle down with her, yada yada, hoping that would be what
pretty-
she would tell me, and then
yeah.
she wouldn't tell me that.
Pretty personality defining situation to be in, like if you're presuming that, you're going around to do a certain thing or, start something up, and that sort of doesn't go that way and it ends up being quite serious, like what's happened, like how you deal with that situation pretty much defines how you're going to be. And if you're in high school at that time, like that's a pretty early age of development to be able to realize what is happening and change your mental state in order to facilitate that conversation.
For sure.
Rather than going, oh, okay, we're not doing this. Oh God, well now I have to deal with this person that's talking about. But that's where you go, oh, okay, right. This is what you wanted me to be here for. Right.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
I think it's just more when you look back as an adult and you think about why you require other people to communicate with and why you want other people to talk about these issues with, or whatever. It's because they're relatable, and it makes a lot more sense as a whole because you got more experience to draw on. But when I was younger, it was more like a scenario where even though outwardly, if someone was to see it and I was to tell you right now that I went and talked to this girl and was, trying to, and was talking to her and listening to what she had to say about her rough home life and things that were happening in her life, you might look at me and say, oh, if I didn't provide any of this context, someone might be like, oh, you're a really kind-hearted person, like you're spending time with that person. But internally, when that news had come to me that she had, passed away, I had to re-review the whole thing and actually face myself and say, well, it's true that physically I was there to provide that, but mentally I wasn't actually in that space to provide what that person might have required to help them in the scenario or to actually get a proper broad understanding of mental health. I was just there because it was an added benefit to, I guess, learn something about, discussing that kind of stuff. But at its crux, when I think about being 16, 17, 18, it was about me. And it's just weird to think back on it and be like, well, it's an interesting example of like the contrast and how perception and how things change from their actual, why they actually occurred when you look back on them 7, 8, 9 years later. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's just weird how things can change and that can affect the way you interact with other people in the future subconsciously. I don't think about that personally. Like I don't think about her a lot. Not in like a, I don't think she was worth thinking about or anything. I just, until we discussed it now, I haven't really thought about it since then. But that probably still plays a part in the way that I would interact with other people,
Right.
That's just the weird part of relationship stuff for me in general, is that I have this weird back and forth of being like really weirdly primal about what I want and then really weirdly like docile and just like I'm just happy to hang out with somebody and talk shit. Like there used to be a girl in my primary school that used to watch Friends all the time. I hated Friends. I still hate Friends. I know I'm going to cop a lot of flack for that, but I just didn't like Friends and I still don't. And I would just pretend to like Friends because I just wanted to talk to her. So she would phone me up every day. Every day when you had the old phone line, she'd phone me up 5:30, 5 o'clock, whenever Friends was on, 4:30 even. I'm not too sure. I can't remember. And she'd just sit on the phone line and talk to me for 30 minutes about Friends. She'd just watch the episode. I might not even be watching. I might just be skipping through some other channel, and sometimes I'd switch back and oh yeah, like that. You know what I mean? So it's just, but that was for no reason. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't actually an end goal to that. It wasn't like, oh, now she's gonna, because I was too young for that even. It wasn't like, oh, now she's gonna like want to hang out with me and like make out or whatever. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, like that was cool. She kind of got joy out of it. Like, you know what I mean?
Interesting.
And that's how relationships, like components of relationships still feel like that to me. Like where it feels like some people have decided not to keep looking for somebody who is actually compatible for them, but to just find somebody who has admiration for them as a person and just make them happy, which is fine, but it also seems kind of unfulfilling to me.
Yeah. I've always believed in the fact that you should never really assume things, like in the context of a relationship, never really assume or presume anything's happening until the other person sort of initiates it. But to contradict that statement entirely, like that could really go to both parties. You know, what if you have some real feelings that you want to get across, or something that you want to happen, but you're being, you know, standoffish about it because you don't want to assume that they want that same thing as well.
Yeah.
But you might both feel that same way, but never have anything happen. It's weird to actually realize when a friendship is a friendship and when a friendship is a relationship.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
when any relationship is
Trust me, I
either
get that
or.
wrong all the time.
Oh, it's
But that's what's the weird thing about it is like every one of those scenarios is contextual. You know, like there'll be a scenario where I'll be with a friend and I'm developing feelings for them, and I'll be like, okay, well, I'll take them to this spot.
Yeah.
I'll tell them these things, and then worst case scenario, this will happen. Best case scenario, this will happen. Yeah. But then I won't do that. And then something will happen where it'll culminate to a point, and something will happen. It'll get physical, or like you do something and it's actually almost too late to explain how you actually felt back like 2 months ago, a week ago even, because the dynamic and the context of that situation has changed everything so much. And then you just leave that scenario and you'll spend a couple of weeks being like, fuck, like I fucked that up. I suck at this because of these reasons. You do a whole lot of self-blame. At the start, you kind of blame the other person for a while. You're like, well, fuck, they're just crazy. Or like, they're a bitch. You're like, why do they do this? But then you just start self-criticizing. And then that goes away. And I'll go back into it with somebody else. And then I'll overcommit. Like I might go within the first, you know, not in the first couple of times, but like when I think I'm in the right scenario, then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to say all of it now.
Yep. And
you go into it and then it's just overbearing and then you just fucked it again, but for a different reason. And you go through the same process again, but for a different reason. It's this weird balancing act where you have to really gauge the other person and how open they are about discussing things that they're not. It's really, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, I think. I think I've said this to you quite a few times before. I think a lot of times, like if you're playing too hard to find something out or to get something going, you've probably got to assume the worst. Like the successful relationships that I've been in have come from sort of just genuine interest and conversation and not really thinking about going out of your way to message something. Yeah, and then just actually coming to a point where it's like, oh, you like me? Oh, well, I've liked you too, sort of thing. You both go, oh, like, oh, you know, that's sort of a weird thing to explain as well. But I've never really had to say to someone like, you know, do you like me? Or like, what is happening? Like, what are we doing? Are we just friends? Or
I've never really had to do that either. But that's also one of the problems, I feel like, is like, I know you're saying that you haven't had to do that and it's resulted in successful relationships. But then there's also a point where if you don't actually quantify what you want out of the scenario, especially as we get older, then you actually just end up getting hurt more because you resent yourself because you're like, well, you know, what about the 10 other times I've been with these girls and there's been like flings and whatever, and then it'll just fizzle out and you just stop talking to them. It's like, well, how do I stop that from happening?
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, you show the person that you actually care about them by verbalizing it early on, and then you scare them away. And it's like, well, okay, maybe next time I won't do that. And then you don't verbalize enough. And obviously I'm repeating what I've said, but it's kind of like a two sides of the coin thing, you know. Like you could say to me that if you got to pursue it too hard, then it's not natural, and then it won't happen naturally, whatever. And if you have to explicitly say that you love somebody or that you have feelings for them, then it's, you know, it's not meant to be. But at the same time, a lot of the other things that happen in my life that are positive happen because I did try to get them. Right. You know what I mean? Like not from like I'm better or I've got an ego or, you know, the ego is driving these scenarios kind of thing, but it's like you go to a party and you're like at the end of the night and you're just like kind of just thinking about going home on your own or just going home and like, or maybe there's just another part of your brain that's like, hey, how about I just try to act completely different for this last hour of the night? And I just say things to people that I wouldn't normally say or do an action that I wouldn't normally do. Not like, I'm not talking assault wise or anything like that, don't get me wrong. Just mean like, you know, put a different way and put a different spin on what you're saying, or like be more forward, or take the cues, take the physical or like, you know, visual cues that you sometimes get from people that could maybe start something that you just ignore in any other kind of mind state because you're just sort of fluffing around or trying to enjoy yourself. And that's the point where I've gotten to now, you know, is that I'm just kind of like, we'll be at the end of the night scenario and be like, oh, what I've just been doing for the last night, or the whole night, didn't work. Maybe for the last hour, if I try something different, it'll work. But I never actually do it. and just go home.
I don't have the right answers to this, and I don't know if
I don't think there
is
right
one right
answers.
answer to
No.
it. But like, yeah, I think at the end of the day, not to sound corny, but like if you have a genuine interest in someone, don't think twice about when and where you should message them, when and where you want to hang out with them.
Just do it.
You just have to do it.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
if that person doesn't feel the same, then you're going to gauge that pretty quickly, and it's really not worth your time anymore after that. Like you could be quite deep feeling wise into it, but like you're just going to aggravate the situation if you're at a point where you've sort of, you know how you feel, but you're not getting that back and nothing's coming from it. Yeah, it's a strange thing, man. It's totally up to the individual and your own personalities as well. But
I'm not playing the whole woe is me thing because it's not like things don't happen for me because they do. But I just kind of mean, yeah, you're right. I guess it's probably, we're talking about, it almost goes back to the ADD kind of compartmentalized mindset kind of thing where it's like, if you're in something, you're fucking in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's why I've always sort of tried to be more careful. I think that's what makes me kind of lonely sometimes. It's just the feeling that you're like, well, I don't have a constant. But then it's almost better that I monitor that because that ADD style of my personality is like relationship stuff, drug use, drinking, and just negative attitude, bro. It's just 4 things that I almost constantly monitor in myself because I know that the ADD stuff that is actually really beneficial to me, like knowledge, like a base of knowledge or music or basketball, whatever, interaction, whatever, that can be funneled into a lot of really good things. But if it's funneled in the opposite direction, I get into a dark place, I'll get fucking dark, you know? And it's just something you got to be aware of. And I think lots of guys, not even having an ADD mindset, but lots of guys will do that. They'll get into one thing that'll put them in a tailspin, whether it's like their romantic life or having to drink with the boys every weekend or whatever. And then you just get in that, and then that's the rut you get, and you never get out of it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's no, like we say, there's no right answers to anything.
No.
It's just, it's situational, and like, yeah, I can understand how and in your case, like how you've explained your personality would sort of, I guess, define how you sort of all your interest goes into that one person or that one relationship. But yeah, it's easy to be pushy and sort of over enthusiastic about something, but I think if you're having to think too much about it, it's probably not right.
For sure.
Like
that's everything for me, though.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. Yeah.
I guess it's more like, the things that I found, the things that potential partners are going to find attractive in you is like passion. Just kind of passion for anything. I don't think it particularly matters what it is necessarily, as long as you're not an asshole, like you're not passionate about like fucking far right politics or something like that.
Sure.
But the thing that people are looking for is like is a spark thing, especially at this age. It's like you're just trying to acknowledge life in somebody's eyes. You know, like if you just see a really cool chick that you like, she's into cool things. She's into academics or surfing or just anything that's unique. The thing that will draw you into it is the passion part of it, you know? And it's like you almost want to display passion all the time because you think that's the pheromone. That's what's like the attractant or whatever. But doing that without looking like a complete fucking nonce is actually like difficult, you know?
Yeah.
Especially if what you do or what you enjoy is solitary. You know, like, you know, it's like art or obviously the podcasting isn't particularly solitary because there's a couple of people, but if someone was to see you in your zone, I think the time that you might be most attractive to somebody is when somebody's seeing you when no one else is looking for you or looking at you. You know what I mean? Like if we were like kind of talking to each other, like, oh man, like haven't really been with a girl in a while. I haven't really spoken to her, had any like good, deep, meaningful conversations with any girls or whatever. If they could see you in your element, that would probably be the biggest attractant that you could give. But you can't.
And
you
I
can't
think
bottle that.
another big aspect of people's personality that the opposite sex or whoever is going to find attractive, is just having a sense of independence and a commitment to a passion. That's really all it comes down to sometimes. Like I think if you're not sort of all together there with yourself, how can you expect to be sort of all together with someone else? You know, it's just always going to come back to that, whether you come in and out of those relationships. Like if you're totally independent, you think you don't need anyone else in your life, you're probably more likely to have a successful relationship for someone that's really sort of itching to be in one because they think it's going to help them, you know.
But that isolation or that dependence on yourself also can become something that you have to monitor too, because like, you know, I feel like I have a wide friend group and a wide range of interests and a wide like spread of, like, I've gone to Australia to go see friends and go all around New Zealand to see friends, and you do that and you experience those things and you hope that grows you as an individual, but there's always a group that you come back to, or like a social setting that you're in again, and sometimes you'll just feel like uncomfortable, like because you've been doing something different, if that makes any sense. Like, you know, I might see somebody in a group of friends that I haven't seen in a while, and they might not ask me what I'm up to or what I've been up to. You just kind of got to, you know, not that you're expecting someone to always ask you like, hey, what have you been up to, or like, where have you been? It's like you can't just ram in like, oh yeah, I was in Wellington for a couple of weeks doing this and this and this and this and then this. Like, and I hate the feeling of having to like come into a conversation and tell somebody why you're interesting. Like I despise that the most, is when somebody is just like, oh, you know, I did this at the skate park and I did this because I can do this, and they're just like throwing things out there that are just trying to build your personality base in front of people. It's just very hard for me, and it feels very awkward. It's like when people ask you about music or art, you know, like somebody else will bring up music, or like, hey, you're a musician, in front of somebody that you've just met. You're like, for fuck's sake, now I've got to like present this whole front and I've got to try to like bottle everything that I'm interested in into this one thing. It's like, bruh.
I don't think anyone likes talking about themselves, hey?
No.
Unless you're just super ego driven, and there's definitely people that can rave on about.
I mean, I did just try to talk about myself for probably the last better part of an hour.
That's what we're here for, isn't it?
But in a conversational context, yeah. Well, I'm trying to discuss it as a parable.
Makes sense.
You know,
Makes sense. Yeah.
throwing bullshit words out there. Eh? We should talk about something funny or something, so it's not so heavy to end it off with.
You got something funny?
What's something funny? What's in the news that you heard about? What's something funny? What's the last?
Sorry,
No.
I just heard about this story today. So the Queen's Guards, you know, the guys that stand tall and still and all of that. Apparently, a couple of them, I don't know whether they got fired or what, but apparently a couple of them got caught abandoning the COVID rules and going on like a cocaine binge. Like, I'll try and.
It sounds like the royal family itself. To
me.
Queen's Guard cocaine
party. They'd gone out and there it is.
13.
Yeah, big.
13 of them.
13 Queen's Guards jailed for attending cocaine-fueled rave in lockdown.
I just love the idea of them wearing the hats, just coked out, like, bruh, how good are these fucking hats?
They were among a group of 16 guardsmen who attended a booze and cocaine-fueled mini-rave at a riverside park.
They only got 14 to 28 days at the military prison. That's pretty...
You think the Queen's Guards that are doing cocaine are no longer the Queen's Guards, right?
Oh, no, they're going to military prison. 100%. It says at the bottom they go to military prison for 14 to 28 days.
Oh, right.
They're getting kicked out of the military for sure. But that's just hilarious. Do you reckon they're just so meditative and still? They're like, I can't wait to get to the boys tonight and just
That's exactly what I said.
I'm just going to go to the boys tonight and do so many lines.
Fucking mind-numbing job that you have to stand still all day, and the amount of people that'll be fucking with you while you're standing there. Can't wait to get out and just.
I love those videos where they smack people, like where they just hit people. Like people think that they can't hit them, or like. You know, they'll try to step, like, there'll be some American tourist like, like waving in his face, and then he'll try to step around him to, like, get further in, and the guard was like, stop! Just slap them open hand.
I've seen a video of...
The one where the guard hits the little girl?
What?
Oh, we've got to watch that one, bro.
I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but there's one...
The thumbnails on these videos, eh?
There's one where I think the guy... it's like an old high school buddy of his, and he goes up to try and like crack him, and he's just antagonizing him for ages, and he can't actually get anything out. But right at the end, I think he smiles. It'll take me forever to. Can
we look up the Queen's Guard hits girl? as soon as you write hits, it'll go hits little girl. Oh, this is
Jesus.
so savage. Like, this is the second one. Watch the second video. This is really funny. People who are listening, like, but it's like if you. Oh, let's just watch it first. I mean. Oh, she's so cute. The smacking
Yeah,
noise
that was
as
not
well.
what I was expecting. I thought
Oh.
it was someone like purposely hitting
No.
a little girl, but he just whacked her
So-
accidentally while he's saluting.
It's if you want to look this up at home, it's called "Soldier Hits Girl in Front of the Queen." So
4.7
it's got
million
4.7
views.
million views. It's funny. It's
Jesus.
it's
Poor thing.
yeah. It's hard to explain why it's fun. Listen to the smacking sound. Oh,
really gets
Oh
her
my
right. Who
God.
fucking salutes like that though?
it's,
like that.
It's because you have to bring.
He's supposed to go out.
He
No.
cooks it. He cooks it. He definitely cooks it. But
I thought you just meant to come straight up. He's like
nah,
right
in the
out.
army,
to
you
the
bring
side.
it up and around. Oh, poor girl. Like the thing, I just want to hear like a longer video, like if she keeps it together or not. Like,
Well, there looked to be another one. That top one.
poor girl.
How long is that one?
It's
That's
a different
52
camera
seconds.
angle. Man, they had all
Oh,
the
it's, I mean,
cameras.
it's the Queen. There's obviously tons of people.
No.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Oh. That little girl keeps it together.
Got a big
What a
snake in the
trooper.
nose. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
what-
that's sweet.
That's. I bet that guard felt like an absolute piece of shit.
And he can't
afterwards,
like.
eh?
He's
can't,
realised
like-
he's done it, but he can't move. Because look here. He says something, or like his mouth opens here.
He might be acknowledging.
Like here he goes. Oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor
Oh,
girl. eh?
God.
I can't believe that cocaine. 13 of them. Who dobbed them in? That's what I want to know. You know? Oh, they tested positive. Why are they testing you for drugs if all you've got to do is stand outside the fucking palace? I mean, I get it. I do get it. I guess just you are
Probably
supposed to protect the queen.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, this is the one sole purpose of the job. But
Honest-
like, if you're, you're probably not able to stand still the whole day if you're on drugs. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're on cocaine, there's no fucking way you're standing there all
But
day.
they're not on cocaine. They were on cocaine.
I
when they're
know,
on the
but
guard,
that's why
though.
there'd be drug testing, so people that
Yeah.
aren't taking it and aren't able to do the job properly.
I get you.
What
I just like. Yeah, nah. Nah.
don't want to get too
I just-
deep into the news
That just
cycle.
makes me sad though. You know, like obviously it sucks. Like, and they shouldn't be doing cocaine. Cocaine is illegal, everybody out there. But at the end of the day, like you say, these guys have a fuck boring job where they have to protect, like, you know,
Wonder if
the
you
biggest
apply to
family
be
of
a
doll
queen.
bludgers that exists on the planet. You know, I'm just gonna bring it. I'm just gonna put it out there. Fuck the monarchy.
I mean, do you apply to be a Queen's Guard, or like are you in? do
You
have
just
Royal
be
Connects? Like,
you'd just be in the military for X amount of time, I'd say, and you'd probably be a very specialized, infantry unit or whatever. I apologize for saying fuck the monarchy. I don't really apologize. I do actually feel that way, but sometimes I worry that my phone and other things are monitoring me. You know,
being tapped.
yeah.
Yeah, probably
I
the
always
same.
feel like somebody's watching me.
Very true.
Honestly, it's yeah.
Oh, jeez.
But you know, we've had a good wee yak here, haven't
Such is life.
we? We've had a bloody good yak here, my bro. I tell you.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, so am I. So am
Should
I,
we-
my bro.
should
Let's
we
go
get
for
a
some
whole
biltong, eh? Yeah, whole chicken. I'd smash a whole chicken right
Do you
now.
think you'd still do it?
What? Eat
Eat
a whole chicken? Grow up. Of course.
Tell me to grow up.
If I hadn't, like, yeah, low key. Low key.
You didn't finish your pizza yesterday. Last time we went to Nando's, you got half chicken. You never
Well,
finished that.
Chickens. Wait, what was the last thing you just said?
Nando's. Times we've been to Nando's.
Oh,
you get a
come
half
on,
chicken.
grow
You
up.
never
Nah,
finished that.
grow up.
You never finished
Grow
it.
up. In the pod. Nah.
Good riddance.
Yeah, all right, I'm walking out. Off you go.
Jeez. All right. Should we do it?
Yep. Thanks
Thanks,
for
Liam.
thanks for listening to me talk shit. I feel like I literally told you nothing about Wellington. at all.
Fuck it. Who cares about Liam?
Yeah. Yeah, fuck them too.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye, Liam. Love you, mate.
Peace in the Middle East.
And chicken grease.
Peace and chicken grease.
Home audio entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down and relax. Enjoy the music.